Someone's going to go for 2 and get it at some point.
It's 1:42 in the morning.
Yeah, that's all right. Number 1. Shocker. Ironton.
Man, give me the Trojans.
There we go.
Welcome into Overtime, presented by Perfection One. Along with John Bruce, my name is Dewey Dailey, as we welcome you into this week's show, episode 60, another milestone for us here on the podcast, episode 60 of Overtime. We've got some headlines we're going to go over. Pretty big week in basketball on both sides, as we'll get into some of the big recaps from this past week, some really tight games and some really big conference implications that took place this week. So we'll obviously dive into all of that. First full week of sports since the week before Christmas. Obviously you have the week of Christmas is pretty cut off because it was on a Wednesday this year. So nobody's really playing before Christmas and nobody really plays the Thursday after. Then obviously the next week is New Year's. And then the week after that this year was, I think, Snowmageddon is what everybody's calling it. So it was nice to get back for a pretty much a full week slate this past week. Another one on tap for us this week. And hopefully that's the case for the rest of the season. As I think now we're safe to say we're past the halfway point in the winter sports season. I think a lot of the conferences are kind of starting to take shape, and you're kind of starting to see some of the teams that are going to contend down the stretch for some of these conferences that we obviously previewed and tried to put out some predictions in the preseason. But yeah, really good week last week, and hopefully another one here this week.
Yeah, I don't think we have anything as wild as last year's OVC on the boys' side, where it was like you didn't know until the last day of the regular season on who was going to win or who was even going to finish 5th in that league because everybody was so tightly contested. This year, I think there's a little more separation between the teams. You still have some teams that are kind of
the SOC2 is kind of
we talked about that a little
direction.
bit. Yeah, the SOC2 looks like it's going to be pretty wild. The OVC still could be because Ironton, with only one loss, we'll see them on Tuesday, but only one loss in league play.
And Fairfield and Chesapeake are going to play each other like twice in like a week or something, like the last week of the season. So
yeah, it's a, as you mentioned, we had all that snow the week before. We went down on Tuesday to Leesburg, and on the way there was some snow drifts blowing across the road.
Snowing today too.
Yeah, and then today it was snowing as well. So can't guarantee that we're going to get through without snow, but I mean, heck, there's still ice on my driveway, and it's been 2 weeks. So it's been a pretty wild run over the last few weeks here in Ohio and kind of all over the place, as we mentioned last week. And yeah, but just really thankful we were able to get out there. We had 3 live streams this week. One was competitive, and that kind of happens sometimes. Sometimes we get some really good ones, and sometimes Minford just decides to be a machine. And then on the girls' side, Adina was a machine on in last night's or Saturday night's game over Huntington as well. So I mean, sometimes teams just really show out, and you don't get the matchups that you envision, but those happen. So this week we're going to get to see 5 new teams as long as the weather holds, and should be a fun week of live streams as well.
And for whatever it's worth, we typically film these Monday night. We are filming this one on Sunday, mostly just because of the Ohio State game on Monday. Didn't want to take the week off because of a football game, so figured we'd just get in a day early and get this episode out. Still probably going to release it on Tuesday, so if you're not even watching this part of the show, you wouldn't even really know that we filmed it a day in advance, because I don't even know why I'm mentioning it, because really nothing is changing because of it. We're still going to do the exact same stuff, including jumping into our headlines for this week. We actually have, I think this is the first performance we've had, single game performance we've had, I think maybe since Tanner Boland last year when he scored 50. But we've got 3 headlines we're going to talk about, and they're actually all 3 unique, as none of them are the same in terms of we have 2 college signings or 2 classics or whatever the case may be. So the first headline we're going to go over is Symmes Valley's Ethan Smith with a 50-burger against Green this past week. I'll kind of let you get into the details, as this was kind of one of your headlines, but I think all 3 of them were. But a big performance for Ethan Smith and a Symmes Valley team that, in the preseason, I think I may have I definitely went with Western to win that league, but I think I went with Symmes Valley as kind of my this team could also win the league. And I think right now Symmes Valley may be the front runner in that conference. I mean, they're one of I think there might be two 2-0 teams in that conference in league play right now, but nonetheless a big performance for the senior.
Yeah, he was 21 of 32 from the field. 9 of 12 from three. Like that's hard to do in an empty gym. We've gotten to places and watched some teams shoot in the pregame and they are not making 9 for 12. So 9 for 12 from three, career high 53 points. They dominated the game. It was an 85-57 win over Green. But really, it's just part of our weekly headlines. We mentioned big performances, and we don't typically get to talk about them because kind of Tanner Boland last year, we kind of put it at like, okay, he put up 50 in a game, and that was kind of where we were kind of sticking at. But yeah, a 53-point performance is got to be one of the top performances in the Southeast District over the past 5 years, probably since before COVID. And he also had 3 assists in the game, so it wasn't like, I'm sure they started to kind of run some extra guys at him, but Smith has been outstanding. We're going to go a little more in depth over him and his team later on in the episode, but really just wanted to throw out a headline to start on how special of a game that is. He's had several big games this year. He's gone over 40 in another game as well. It was the game him against Owen Johnson. He had 43 or 45. Owen Johnson from Colegrove had 43, and I believe that was a 2-point win for Symmes Valley. So for Symmes Valley, it's been a nice start to their season. Things are going to get tough on Tuesday, but we'll see them on Saturday over in Beaver against Eastern, and that's going to be one of our previews later on. So just want to give a shout out to Ethan Smith on an obviously outstanding game. He didn't cover my varsity career in one game, but he was pretty close. So pretty outstanding performance.
Yeah, it's them and Northwest, both 2-0 in the SOC2 right now.
Just as everyone would have predicted in the preseason.
Right, and I mean, really that's, we mentioned that the SOC2, the 1, 2, and 3, they all start league play after the new year. So they're already kind of getting a late start and then losing a week due to the snow that pushed them back even further. So really only 1 week of league play down for them. So they've obviously got 8 more league games to play in, less than a month. So these next 4 weeks obviously going to be big for all of the SOC conferences here in the next month or so. As I think the last game I think I saw is maybe like February 16th is about when obviously the tournament draws a bit earlier.
So the tournament draws a little earlier, but where there's 7 divisions, tournament play doesn't start for a while. So I think where with the snow, teams were able to schedule games a little bit later than what they normally would have because tournament play usually would start like a couple days after Valentine's Day or the week of Valentine's Day, and it looks like it's going to be pushed back maybe another week after that. So we'll see. I think we'll see a few more regular season games in that week.
All right, we'll go ahead and move on to our second headline for this week. Another addition to the 1,000 point club here in Southern Ohio is Huntington's Allie Baker. Crossed the milestone this past Wednesday against Paint Valley, a big win for Huntington. And I believe she went close to 30 points in that one to get 1,000. So a big single game performance for Baker, also crossing the big career milestone as well.
Yeah, she had a 30-point game against Chillicothe to start the season. And typically in games where a player needs a lot of points, we would have seen it both in person. Uniona's Isaac Little a few years ago needed like 31 and got it within 3/4 of a game. And it was like, that was kind of nuts because sometimes players kind of force things. So on Wednesday night, Baker needed 29 points against Paint Valley and she was able to do it. And it was in a 58-33 win for Huntington. So it wasn't like, maybe she was forcing things. Who knows? I wasn't there, but she needed 29 points and she got 29 points. So she did what she needed to do to get it, even though doing it on the road, had a chance to maybe do it at home against an Adena team, but she was able to go into that Adena game kind of free and clear of not worrying about hitting that milestone. As she had 13 points in that loss against Adina on Saturday, but it was still nice to be able to get that. When she was a freshman, she played with one of the best ever in the SVC in Allison Basie, and she really took over as their volume scorer the next year, and she's done a really good job for them, keep them, very competitive each season, where they haven't been at the top of the SVC, but they've been very competitive. And a big part of that has been because of what Allie Baker's been able to do. So congratulations to her. I believe she's at 1,013 points after that game on Saturday, and she will just keep adding on. I listed the 1,000-point scores in that Huntington game because I got the banner up, and I was just kind of listing them. And if you score 1,000 points at Huntington on the girls' side, it's a pretty good list, because you've got Basie, you've got Lydia Bridenball, Ariel Sams, and Braden Collins, and that's all within the last 10 to 15 years. Those are some really, really talented players that they've had, and then obviously Basie went on to play at the Division I level as well. So it's a pretty good group to get in if you're at Huntington.
And then our last headline for this week, a little less notable than the first two. We're just kind of highlighting the 5th annual Winter Hoops Classic over at Eastern Brown. We've been down there a couple of times. I think we've live streamed games down there.
I think it was
twice,
maybe the second and third annual.
So yeah, we've been down there before. We're not going to be down there this year, but it's another one of those really good classics that a Shack school puts on. I mean, you see the Hodson and
Coach Young
and the Young and the Brown County Classic, all that take place. I know sometimes if it's at Western Brown or maybe at Georgetown, some of the times you may not see it at one of the Shack schools, but kind of in that Shack area.
And even Ripley runs their own holiday classic as well. So I mean, it's something that the Shack schools do and do very well. They've got some good sponsors around there, and they take care of people. I know when we went down a couple of years ago, we got shirts. Yeah, I definitely wasn't expecting that, but yeah, it's a really nice event. Coach Pickrell does a really good job. They do a good job of matching up teams. And one of my favorite things is no matter how good Eastern Brown is, I think they always play like the 9:30 game. So
I think it was 8 a.m. a couple years ago. They played Chillicothe, and it was like. That was kind of one, and that was one of the years. I think that was the last year we went, so it would have been 2 years ago. And it was like, you kind of want to broadcast that one, but 8 a.m. That's about an hour, 15-minute drive. Like, I'm not getting up at 6 a.m. for that. So
But yeah, this is the 5th annual Winter Hoops Classic. As we said, they do a really good job, and they take care of things really well down there. We've mentioned before, the Shack really takes care of us when we go down there, and we really appreciate it. So hopefully this is another well-run year for them. As here's the schedule: 9:30 is going to be Eastern Brown taking on Jackson. Then you've got Parkersburg taking on Mason County. After that, I think that one may be a sneaky good game. Parkersburg beat Unioto, so I mean and they competed pretty well with Fairland, so that's a pretty talented team. And then the 1 o'clock game might be the best one of the day, is Fayetteville against Minford. Minford starting to play much better. Fayetteville has been a pretty darn good team all season.
Going to win the Shack too, I would believe. So
then you've got McLean against Goshen, which I'm not sure how Goshen is this year, but I know when we saw them a couple years ago, they were pretty solid. And then McLean's had a really nice year. Then you got Peebles and Chillicothe. North Adams against Notre Dame. That's the 6:15 game. And then the nightcap is Wheelersburg against Western Brown. So Brown County taking over the first and last game of the day. So as we mentioned, it's always it's a nice event down there at Eastern Brown. They run it well. They stay on time. They do. It's pretty spread out. So you got an hour and 45 minutes in between each one on that. So they're very unlikely to get behind. But it's a good event. So if you are down in Brown County on Saturday, make sure you check that one out.
I would assume that most of Eastern Brown's girls and boys roster are either forced or volunteer to help out in different various roles during the classic. So I'd say that has a little bit to do why Eastern Brown is always in that early AM slot. If I had to guess, I'd say the boys probably off this Saturday. I would have to look to know that for sure, as I'm not 100% positive. But I'm guessing that probably has something to do with it. Is just so you have more hands on deck with so many different schools coming in and that type of stuff.
Well, and then especially with that early slot, then you're not you probably don't have as many extra things that need worked on, which is where your parent volunteers probably come in. So
Yeah,
you're done by 11, you more than likely are able to get some more help in there. Do they play? I was getting ready to pull up theirs on, yeah. So
yeah, that kind of makes sense. All right, you ready to move on to our boys basketball segment for this week?
yes.
All right, so we've got 2 games we're going to recap, an actual team of the week this week that played more than one game, and then we're going to preview 3, do our quick picks, and then get on to the girls segment to round out this week's episode. So the first game we're going to talk about was our Tuesday night installment of Shaction with Fairfield and Eastern Brown. 44-42 was the final, with Fairfield remaining being able to stay at a 1-loss team in the league to stay even with Fayetteville Perry on the Shack 2 side. Eastern Brown, I believe, now has 2. No, at the time they had 2, yeah. But now they have 3 losses in the Shack. We talked about how for Eastern Brown it was really going to be a tough week, as you had to go to Fairfield and to North Adams, 2 really big, probably the 2 biggest Shack games of the season for them. I think they still play Fayetteville Perry once as well, so that's not exactly going to be a walk in the park, as we highlighted how Fayetteville leads the Shack regardless of division in free throw and 3-point percentage. But Eastern Brown goes 0-2 or 1-2 on the week. I'm not sure if they played on Saturday.
They did. They beat Blanchester by a lot.
In the Coach Young Classic over at North
That was
Adams.
Like the only matchup where before I was like, oh, that's not a great matchup. But
yeah, they dropped 2 really big Shack games. So most likely, I say most likely, but more or less, I don't even know if North Adams has 3 Shack games left. So North Adams is...
They do.
Well, I guess they've only played 7, so they probably have about 6 left.
Yeah,
but North Adams is all but clinched the Shack woman.
Yeah, because they've got...
They're going to play Fayetteville
and Fairfield this week.
Yeah.
So,
but I mean, I'm
not sure even if they lose those 2, they're still up a game.
Right.
So
I'm not sure I see North Adams losing 3 Shack games. But getting back into the Fairfield and Eastern Brown game, was a really big win for Fairfield. As a loss here, I think the rematch with Fayetteville, I'm not sure when that is, but I mean, it was must win anyway. Now you got a little more room, as you still only have 1 loss, where if you drop to the 2 loss and then you lose to Fayetteville again, then you're kind of 2 games back and really out of it. So a big win for Fairfield, and kind of a come from behind win, although they really evened it up as it got closer to halftime. But for Fairfield, at one point in the first quarter, I think trailed 15-3 or something like that.
They really
trailed by like
struggled.
12 points.
Really struggled out of the gate. Eastern shot the ball well. And Cade Walkup, he can get going pretty early for them. You had Braxton Vance, I thought played a really good all-around game for them. Grady
Barber.
For him
next year. I mean, even for the rest of this year as well.
Right. Yeah, it's
15 footers. And
yeah, him being able to knock down the mid-range jumper is going to make them even scarier. Because, I mean, we saw, I think it's Matthew Dick, he's like a 6'8" sophomore in the JV game. It's just like, oh, so this guy doesn't play, but he's probably going to play next year. So you're adding a 6'8" guy. Oh, that's with Coach Buechler, who clearly knows how to use size too. Right. So, but yeah, it was a Fairfield game where they really battled from a slow start and then started to chip away. Ultimately, they were down 2 with about 2 minutes left. Started to foul or play more physical defense. They force a turnover. Logan McIntosh with a nice drive and score. And then it was a mix of Quentin McIntosh, Logan McIntosh, and then Caleb Barrera ended up with the loose ball. Logan McIntosh leaks out. Perfect lead pass from Barrera, and then a layup that kind of rattled in at the buzzer for Logan McIntosh. He did not shoot well to start. I believe he was 1 for 8 to start, but he made his last 4 field goal attempts. Finished with 15 points, most of those coming in the second half. He had a really nice close to his night. Brody Smith with 19 points, 15 of those came in the first half for Fairfield. He went on a 10-0 run in that second quarter, which is what got them back into the game, was what Brody Smith was able to do. Hit a couple threes and just played overall really well for them in that first half. Griffin Friend didn't have a huge game, but was solid. Barrera, it was his first game back after he missed a couple. Offensively, it wasn't really there, but he did a good job of distributing the ball. Chase Newman knocked down a long two, which was a big shot at the time. It looked like it was a three to tie it, but ended up just being a long two. And then we mentioned Quentin McIntosh as well. So they're getting Dane Hodson played some big minutes for them at the end of the first half. They're getting some contributions. They have three guys that average in double figures, but if you're getting contributions from Quentin McIntosh, Chase Newman, Caleb Barrera, that's just going to make this a better team for Fairfield. They ended up beating Ripley 56-22 on Friday, so they moved to 10-2 on the season after the week, 7-1 in league play. Pretty easy week this week, I would say, with at 13-2 Uniota on Tuesday, and then you're at North Adams, who has not lost in shack play on Friday. So one of the tougher weeks in our coverage area this week for Fairfield, but Coach Williams has them believing. They've got three guys that can do it, and they're a solid team.
And, getting back into that Shack 2 race with Fairfield and Fayetteville, I mean, they both sit at 6-1, and they both played North Adams this week. So
yeah,
I would assume that rematch is coming up in the next few weeks, probably not 3 weeks. I'd say it's either next week or the week after. And it's at Fayetteville. So for Fairfield, if you're able to pick up a win over North Adams this week, maybe Fayetteville drops it and you have a 1-game lead going into that rematch.
It's the big day.
Oh, the 31st?
Yep. At Fayetteville.
I'll tell you what, the January 31st is a crazy slate. There are some, I would have to go through and mark it all down. We'll talk about it next week. We'll talk about that slate.
It's at least 3 more or less league championship games.
Yeah.
Or, setups to set up the rematch for a secondary game.
If we had 4 broadcast groups, they would all be going to games because Minford, South Webster at Minford is that night. But man, there are some other.
Well, Union at Zane Trace, which looks like it's going to be the SVC championship game too, and then we mentioned Fairfield at Fayetteville. That's another one.
I think Jackson's at Miami Trace that night.
I think it may be that night. Yeah, it's
or maybe that's the 24th.
That's
I would have to go look, or the 28th maybe.
But either way, it's a just pretty insane night of basketball. So, Hillsborough at Jackson. I mean. Symmes Valley at Northwest. I mean, that has a chance to
Those are the top 2 teams in the SOC too right now.
We haven't really talked Oak Hill at all, but Oak Hill at Western is a really interesting game that night. I mean, North Adams at Peebles. Let's say North Adams wins both of those league games this week. They might wrap the league up that night.
Right.
And that Peebles team is pretty solid. So, moving on from that, going to the Eastern Brown side. So you had Grady Barber with 13 on that night, 10 points from Braxton Vance, as we mentioned. Chase Pinkerton had a nice game as well. He had 8. They lose to North Adams on Friday, beat Blanchester on Saturday. So they're 9-4, 5-3 in the shack. But their team, I think they're 5th right now in the RPI in Division 5. They're a team I don't think you really want to see, especially if we're not there, because they tend to lose when we're there by 2 to 3 points every time. I think it's there. We've done 4 games the last 2 years. Only one of them was decided by more than 2 points. It was a 3-point game that was a 3-pointer made with 5 seconds left last year. So it's Eastern is a very solid team. They've got 2 games this week, both at home versus Batavia on Tuesday and then versus West Union on Friday, which West Union's better, but that's still going to be, they're still going to win that.
Batavia,
according to Kenneth Hay. Yes. And then, so it was a good game. So if you want to check out on YouTube to watch the replay, you can do that. It was, and I believe, Raymond Cleedle was there. So he had some pictures. I think that got shared. Probably not, but
yes,
at the very least, it's on Raymond's accounts and whatnot. So that was a really good game over there. So moving on to the next really good game, which was Lucasville Valley 45, Portsmouth West 42, which was to me kind of an upset in a way, because I expected West to maybe not run away with that game, but I thought it'd be a solid game that West would win. But I really liked what I saw out of Valley. They were able to, they just kind of plug away at you. I think they're a well-coached team. They played a nice 2-3 zone, which caused some issues for West, which West plays a really good 1-3-1 zone. So I thought they'd be a little more prepared, but they looked very confused at times. Ultimately, it was a Blake Lundy layup with just under 50 seconds left to play. Christian Cotton or Copen found him from the top of the key, did a good job of looking off his defender and then hitting him on the back door on a cut. They had done that 3 or 4 times in the game, and ultimately that made the difference. So Lundy led the way for Valley with 12 points. Braxton Conway with 10 points, knocked down a couple of threes in the second half for them. Jackson Bender with 9 points and 11 rebounds. He played well. He had a big rebound. I think they may have given him a block with about 6 seconds left as well. It was kind of a lot of stuff happening on the play. So I don't know. Copen with 9 points, 6 assists. He did a great job of just, he moved the zone so well with his eyes. I was really impressed with what I saw of them. And that's not even mentioning Chase Davis, who had 5 points in the game. Chase Davis is their only senior, and he knocked down free throws at the end of the game to help extend it, make it a 3-point lead. They end up losing on Friday to Waverly, a 42-40 game. So they're 7-5, 1-2 in the SOC3. And then they've got speaking of super easy weeks, they've got a super easy week this week. South Webster on Tuesday, at Minford on Friday, and then at Chesapeake on Saturday. A combined record of 31-1 between those 3 teams.
2 points away from being 32-0.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, it's Minford loses a instant classic down at Shawnee State on Saturday against a really good Warren team by 2 points. And so 31-1 between those 3 teams. And it's not like they've played an easy schedule between the 3. So it's going to be a really tough week for Valley. But with, being underclassmen, I think they're a team that you're going to see near the top of the SOC3 next year. I thought maybe it was going to be Wheelersburg and Waverly with West poking their head in at times, but I think this is a Valley team that might be able to poke around as well. So West, after the week, they are 8-3, 1-1 in SOC3 play, and they were led on the day by Logan Wolfenbarker with 14 points, Will Kegley with 13, Christian Carrasco with 8. Mason Parker is really their only senior that does much in the game. He had a big basket. He tied the game late. I believe he tied it at 42 after Carrasco had a nice baseline drive to make it a 2-point game. Corbin Miller, only a sophomore, is another one. So these 2 teams are very young. So their rematch, I believe, might be on the 31st as well. So it's sometime around there. Should be a interesting rematch over in Lucasville. They ended up bouncing back, beating Point Pleasant. I think it had marked down on Sunday on Max Prep, so I'm guessing it was a Saturday game. Beat them 55-38. They don't have necessarily the easiest week. I would say it's marginally easier than what Valley has, but it's still a very tough week as they're at Wheelersburg on Tuesday versus Waverly on Friday, and then they're at Manchester on Saturday. So
I'll tell you what, though, I think they probably go 2-1. But it wouldn't surprise me if they went 3-0.
No, it wouldn't surprise me at all.
At Wheelersburg's going to be tough, but I mean, they seem like they're West. I think West basketball has been, kind of overshadowed with how good their football team has been the last, 3 or 4 years. But you're 8-3 right now. You obviously have Wolfenbarker, who, as a sophomore, had a lot of experience. I think I would assume Wolfenbarker took a lot from that senior group at Northwest last year. And then Will Kegley kind of I'm not sure how much Kegley did last year, or, if he played much varsity basketball, just because I didn't follow West that heavy last year. But, as a junior, Kegley kind of seems to be stepping into a major role and kind of being a big player in the SOC3. So I think it's a West team, and I think they're, 4th in Division 6 in RPI right now. So it's a team that, maybe not a lot of people expected to be very good this year, just based on how, they've kind of, like I said, kind of been overshadowed by the football team the last couple of years. But, they've, 8-3. That's pretty solid start to the season halfway through.
I said this to P. Floyd the other day down at that game. I was like, looking out at West and just knowing the roster of what they had last year, I'm not sure Wolfenbarker, I know he played football. I'm not sure he was a big football guy. Right. I don't think Kegley played. So when your 2 best players are really basketball first guys, and that's something West hasn't really had a lot of. They typically have football guys that play basketball. Right. But now you've got basketball first kids that both have some really nice length. I think Kegley's listed at 6'3", Wolfenbarker is 6'4". Mm-hmm. So they have some good length. They both can shoot it. And then you mix in a football guy like Mason Parker, Christian Carrasco. I'm not sure if Corbin Miller played football as well. I mean, he's got some good length as well as a sophomore. So they've got some nice, Braden Atkins, a nice athlete. I know he's a football player. But you've got some solid players, and I think it mixes in well. I think they're pretty well coached, and they play that really good 1-3-1 zone, which I'm guessing will be fixed a little bit on the backside, which is what Valley was kind of able to expose a little bit. But yeah, I think the SOC 3, well, it's very top heavy with Minford and Wheelersburg. I think the next four
and
teams,
Webster up there too.
Yeah, I meant South Webster instead of Wheelersburg on that. But when you've got Wheelersburg West, Valley, and Waverly, even for Minford and South Webster, I think you got to make sure you're ready to play every night because all four of those teams have capable players.
I think Valley's, kind of in that boat, but got there in a different way, as in, I think whenever they were in their last year in Division 4, they won a district title, and then the year after, I'm not sure they won a district, but I know they were competing with the class of 2023 with like Arnett, Carter Nickel was in there. The class that were seniors when like Copley was a junior. So you graduate all those guys, and then you graduate Copley last year, who won Player of the Year in that conference. So it's a team that's like, well, they've just been so gutted from graduation the last couple of years. How good can they really be? Well, I mean, they're off to a 7-5 start, and they just handed a really good West team their third loss of the season and their first conference loss as well. Now, Valley probably going to be under 500 after this week, just because if Valley wins one of these games, they might be the first and only team of the week that didn't go 500, because beating I mean, you're home against South Webster, but you have to go to Minford and to Chesapeake. Like I just like the only game I could maybe see them winning is probably Chesapeake, because Chesapeake played Rock Hill pretty close, and Rock Hill's like 3-7. I think they beat Rock Hill like 44-43. So, maybe they catch Chesapeake on an off night. But, I mean, you've seen Valley. I haven't. I'm assuming they're like everybody else around here, maybe besides Minford, and probably doesn't have anybody that can guard Eli Roberts.
Right.
And, they probably don't have anybody that can guard Bennett Kaiser either, or, Miles Montgomery. We've seen both of those guys. I mean, they both had 20 points in the first half against Wheelersburg. But, I think this was kind of the criticism of Wheelersburg after that game, where you're not going to beat Minford running up and down the floor. You got to make your possessions long, and you have to capitalize. Like, you can have a 60-second possession, but if you don't score, who cares? Because Minford's going to take the ball down and score in 5 seconds. So, if you can extend possessions and score on those possessions, I think that's kind of the recipe to beat Minford. And I say you can't run up and down the floor with him, but clearly that's what Warren did on Saturday, and they won doing that. But Warren, is one of the top teams in Division 3, I think. Yeah. So, they're able to do that. I think South Webster could maybe get away with doing that. But when you're a team that maybe is not less talented, but maybe not as physically gifted as Minford, you're not going to be able to run up and down the floor with them. So, Valley, big test this week, 3 big tests for them this week. If they come out 500, like in terms of their overall record, I'd be pretty impressed.
Yeah, it would be a very impressive week. And then, I think Tuesday after, they still got to go to a very improved Paint Valley team. So it's not like you get a super easy break right after. But they're a team that I think, despite whatever their record ends up being after this week, I think Valley's a team you need to keep your eye on.
They're Division 6 as well.
Yes.
Somebody's going to be upset that they're a top, because like I said, they're probably going to be 7-8 after this week. And with the tournament draw closing in, there's going to be probably a top 4 or 5 seed that's really mad they have to play Valley.
Yeah, it's
because obviously they were going to have to play Minford and Webster regardless, but the matchup with Chesapeake as a non-conference matchup is just kind of unfortunate that that's one of your non-conference matchups. But yeah, I would say a top 4 or 5 seed that gets matched up with Valley isn't going to be too happy with that matchup. So
yeah, right now Portsmouth West is actually 2 and Valley is 5.
Oh, so Valley's that high?
Yeah. So, but
I guess they are, but I'm saying there's no way they're that high after this week.
Right.
Now, the quality of opponent is up there.
Yeah.
But I just don't see them. I don't really see them picking up a win this week.
I don't know if we'll even talk about it next week, but I'm just going to say it just so we have like a note of it. But their opponent win percentage coming into this week is .563. So we'll see. We got to look at that next week to see what it ends up being, because I think that's going to jump. I mean, 31-1 is going to jump.
It's got to put it up to like I'm not sure how the math would work, but that's got to push it up to like 62, 3,
Yeah.
4, 5, somewhere in there. But
Yeah, they're playing quality teams, and while maybe losses will hurt their overall win percentage or quality of wins, but that opponent win percentage will have a big impact as well.
All right, so we'll move on to our team of the week for this past week. It's a team we've kind of mentioned a couple of times throughout the show already, but it was the Northwest Mohawks, right? It's a team that graduated 4 of their 5 starters from a season ago, that historic district title team out of McDermott, and their 5th starter transferred, obviously, to Portsmouth West. So there's going to be a lot of new guys coming in for Coach Scarberry is still there, I believe. So. But off to an 8-4 start, 2-0 in conference play. Off the top of my head, I believe they beat South Gallia was their first conference win. I would have to look it up to clarify that. But obviously they had a big win on, I think it was Friday. At home against Eastern. Yeah, it was South Gallia. They beat by 21 in their first conference win. So a big win over East. So they went 2-0, obviously, in conference play on the week. Now, they did have a loss to Notre Dame earlier in the week. Notre Dame, I believe, one of the top teams in Division 6 as well. Or are they Division 7? I thought they were Division 6.
They are 7.
Are they Division 7? Well, they got to be a top 4 or 5 team, I would assume, in the Southeast in Division 7. Just because, other than Fairfield, and they might be number 3. Yeah, so a top 3 team in Division 7. But I think it's a Northwest team that, with as much new personnel as they have, maybe shock some people. I mean, me included. If you told me halfway through the season that there would be 2 undefeated teams in terms of conference play in the SOC2, I don't think Northwest would have been one of my choices. But a big win over Eastern at home. And coming up this week, the Oak Hill matchup on Wednesday is kind of an interesting one. And then you have Western at home on Friday. So two more big conference matchups. And in the SOC too, I really, and no shade to South Guy, but I think South Guy is kind of the odd man out. Any of these other matchups that don't include South Guy, I think, are borderline toss-ups.
I would say even at South Gaia is kind of a borderline toss-up in there, because that's one of those places it's not easy to get to.
No,
so it's you got a long bus ride, and it's just kind of it's hard to win on the road anyway. But when you got a long bus ride, that's not the easiest bus ride. It can make things a little more interesting. But yeah, they graduated 4 starters, as we mentioned, 5th one transferred, and kind of one of the issues that I saw coming into the season, we saw their JV team last year, and they were one of the ones where we were like, oh, keep an eye on these guys, but it's also JV going into the varsity level. Well, it was one of the games at the Convo where Wolfenbarker had 3 fouls in the first half, and they kept playing him. Like, he came out for like a couple of plays, but it was like they had to have those 5 guys on the floor. Right. So now they've gone a little deeper. They did benefit from a transfer. They got Brendan Weiss from Valley. He had 24 points in that game against Eastern. I believe he's still eligible in the second half. Sometimes you don't see that with transfers, so keep an eye on that. They have played 12 games, but that game against Adena, we didn't really have any information on other than a 64-48 win. So keep an eye on that. So if Weiss is around, Ivan Ely played a little bit last year for them as a freshman, but then Aiden Armbruster is the big body for Northwest. I know they like to feed him inside. He can really play. He's got good footwork. He's big, strong. We saw him in the football field. He moves really well for his size, and he's one of those.
Wasn't he their punter too?
Yeah, yeah. He's just an all around good athlete overall. Is Armbruster. So I'm actually going to be covering that game on Wednesday down at Oak Hill. So I'm excited to get to see this Northwest team in person, get eyes on them. I know later in the season we're planning on getting down to McDermott. But be always good to get eyes on the teams beforehand.
Just to clarify, I said they picked up 2 conference wins this week. That win over South Gaia was right before all the snow came in. So that other one was over Adena on Friday. It was on Saturday. The win over Eastern was Friday, and the loss to Notre Dame was on Tuesday. So they started the week 0-1 and finished out the weekend going 2-0. So.
Don't look at Adena's record. Look at some of their results. That's kind of the biggest thing, because they've had some ugly results, but lately they've played better. They beat Westfall was down a key player in that one, but they still beat them and pretty handily. They played Zane Trace, who like has been pretty dominant in their games. Played them to a 12-point deficit and losing by 12, but it was a 5-point game in the fourth quarter the other day. So that's a it's a horrendous record wise for Adina, but it's an Adina team that has been playing better. So a 16-point win for on the road is always a good thing.
All right, so that'll wrap it up for our recaps and our team of the week. We'll go ahead and move on to the preview side of the boys segment. We've got 3 games we're going to talk about. 2 of them we will be live streaming this week, and then the other one I think we alluded to earlier in the show, a big conference matchup in the Shack that we will talk about second. So we'll start off with our Tuesday night live stream, our first trip to Portsmouth in the winter sports season, as the Ironton Fighting Tigers are making the trip over to P-Town once again this Tuesday night. The 5-4 Ironton Fighting Tigers, 4-1 in conference play. So they struggled a little bit outside of the conference, but I'll give you a little snippet of information that'll kind of clear that up. And obviously for Portsmouth, would probably be a little bit better if you had Sean Terry on the roster, but in early enrollment to Missouri, he's not going to be around for basketball season. And even though they're 5 like this is not a 5-4 basketball team, and once again you'll hear why in a second. So senior Braden Schreck, just looking at his stats, up there with Brody Buchanan probably for OVC Player of the Year, along with I think Casey's kind of been the top guy down at Chesapeake, and can't go without mentioning Owen Johnson, who I think won the award last year. But 20.5 points for Schreck. Bryce Markins, 12 points per game. Ashton Lane, a sophomore, was really impressed with what he did as a freshman last year. He's up to 10 points per game in his second year as a varsity starter. So of Ironton's 4 losses this season, so that's Minford, Fairfield, and they played Spring Valley twice, which you don't see a lot in the regular season for a non-conference opponent. A combined record of 29-2, because Minford's 9-1, Spring Valley's 9-0, and Fairfield is 11-1. And really, you could almost maybe count Spring Valley twice just because it's a second loss. But just between those 3 teams, a 29-2 record. So that's who those 4 losses are to. So like I said, this is not a 5-4 team. They're a lot better than that.
Yeah, and that Minford game, their first one coming off of a state championship in football. Schreck was your quarterback there. It's just you've got, and Schreck's a 1,000-point scorer. He got there last year. They're a really talented team, really good athletes, and obviously they know how to win. So they're a team to watch for sure. This is kind of a double preview also, because they also play on Friday, but this one is for the game on Tuesday, which we will be at. But yeah, this is an Ironton team, 5-4 record. They've challenged themselves obviously with that 29-2 record for those opponents in the non-conference, just
the teams they've lost
to. The teams they've lost to so far. But yeah, it's an Ironton team that you don't want to see in the second half of the year, because they're just going to get more into basketball mode throughout the year. So they appear to be getting better. We really liked what we saw at Ashton Lane last year, that his performance against North Adams, they were down big at halftime down at the Convo last year, and he almost single-handedly brought them back into that game. Really made it an interesting game down the stretch. So they're a team to watch for sure. And this one, really excited to get eyes on these teams as well.
And then, for Portsmouth, and it's a similar story with Portsmouth. So they're 6-7, haven't had as much luck as Ironton has in conference play. They sit at 3-3 in the OVC. Connie Thomas, Daquan Woods coming over from Notre Dame, and then Malachi Loper last year transferring from Clay. Those are some of the big key guys for first-year head coach Aaron Smith. Of Portsmouth's 7 losses, so we're talking about Minford, Chesapeake twice, Spring Valley, Lawrence County, Wheelersburg, and South Point, who they beat South Point in their second meeting, I think, a week or 2 ago. 51-17, the record of those teams, and 12 of those losses are from South Point and Wheelersburg. So, Minford and Minford, Chesapeake, Minford and Spring Valley, similar opponents for these 2 teams, and neither of them were able to get the better of them. So it's 2 teams that have played really tough And the OVC is a pretty tough conference itself, but these teams have really challenged themselves outside of the OVC, which is why, maybe their overall record isn't where I think it would be if their record accurately reflected like how good the team actually was. And it's a Portsmouth team that's coming off of a really solid win over Chillicothe, over Shawnee State this past Saturday. They've beat Notre Dame this year as well. And obviously you graduate Donovan Breach and Barry. DeAndre Barry last season. But with Connie Thomas transferring over, Malachi Loper coming back, it's a team that, once again, I don't think a top seed in Division 5 would be very happy that they drew Portsmouth.
Yeah, they have won 4 of their last 5, 5 of their last 7, going back to the 1-point win over Notre Dame. In there, you have a 5-point loss to Wheelersburg, and then a substantial loss to Chesapeake. Sometimes just a bad matchup in that aspect, but that win over Chillicothe was really impressive. Good recovery win over South Point after losing to them the first time. So right now, Portsmouth is sitting in the 8th seed. I don't know if Minford would worry too much in that aspect, but at the same time, you could get an easier matchup if you look, in certain aspects if you're Minford. So, but this is a Portsmouth team. They could move up.
Are there only 8 teams in division? How many teams is that who Minford would play?
Eventually,
right?
There's 18 teams. There's 18 teams, so they would play like the 16, and then the winner of the 16 and 17 game. But they just kind of keep going down from there. So for Portsmouth, they're sitting in that 8 seed right now. They're 5 and 7 on there because they have a win over Ross County Christian that doesn't count towards the RPI because they're a non-OHSAA school. So, but
Lawrence County isn't either.
But they're
factored in.
They're factored in because they're a state-affiliated school in a different state.
Okay.
So
playing Christian academies is like...
unless they are
which
affiliated.
I don't think very many are.
Not in our area, but up in Columbus and Cleveland.
Well, yeah, like Harvest Prep and some of those schools, but, around here we don't have too many high school association.
But I think you're going to see
Catholic school.
I think you're going to see schools. At least, I would say Ross County Christian probably isn't that far from making the jump. I think New Hope kind of dominates in what they play in, so I don't think they mind. I think Ross County Christian is a little more closely oriented to what the OHSAA does as opposed to what New Hope does. So yeah, I think this is a Portsmouth team that is getting rolling at the right time. They seem to be kind of mixing in well this time. We've mentioned it before where they had kind of a slow start because Coach Smith didn't get hired for such a long time that even though he was running a lot of the stuff, it's still it's not the same as let's say they bring in someone else. Well, they're probably going to run something completely different. So who knows how much stuff they were really running, knowing that he was going to be the coach. So he gets hired very late. They get off to a slow start, but winning 4 of their last 5, and now they're sitting at 6 and 7. So this should be an interesting game on Tuesday, and then I would guess it'll be an interesting game again on Friday.
Right. So I'm assuming this was one of the matchups. I'm guessing it was the one at Ironton that got snowed out originally. And
actually, it would have been this one because
so this one was the one that got snowed out.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So they play each other twice this week. Once on Tuesday, which is, that's when we'll be there. So kind of lucky for us it got snowed out when it did because I don't remember where we were going to go on Tuesday.
It was kind of up in the air. Yeah. Because there's a couple good ones that night. We got Jackson, Miami Trace, Fairfield at Uniota. So there's a couple options.
I meant originally. Like,
it was one of those two.
Right. So, yeah, they play once on Tuesday, and then once again on Friday. We'll be at the one on Tuesday. The one at Friday is down at Ironton, so we will not be down there. I'm assuming my town or, whatever.
It should be my town,
We'll have that game. Just one last thing about this matchup before we roll on to our next game. Last year, Portsmouth swept the season series with Ironton, including a 92-85 triple overtime win at home against the Fighting Tigers. That was the second matchup of the season. So they beat Ironton the first time at Ironton, and that win over Ironton was their first in the last 10 meetings. So they snapped a 5-year losing drought to Ironton as the Fighting Tigers had won 10 consecutive meetings between the two. So I just thought I'd throw that in there. We'll move on to our next game. This one is on Friday. We kind of talked about it a little bit when we were talking about the Fairfield and Eastern Brown recap. It is Fairfield at North Adams this Friday. Fairfield, as of now, 8-2, 6-1. That 6-1 record.
10-2, 7-1.
They're 10-2.
I put it up earlier. Yeah,
it says 8-2 right there.
You put that.
Oh, sorry. Well,
no,
whatever.
Well, you put it off of the Shack website. For some reason, Fairfield has just not updated the Shack website because they had a win over Wilmington, and then the Eastern game was not mentioned on there. So,
but yeah, Fairfield 10-2. That will be different one way or another, and the 6-1 in the Shack, that will be the same come Friday. But they're at Unioda on Tuesday, which is kind of an interesting. It's like almost like a crossover episode.
Right.
Like you don't see those teams really play each other too much. We've talked about how Fairfield is tied with Fayetteville for the Shack 2 as they both sit at 6-1. You know, we've said it 100 times. With Quentin Williams down there, just an absolutely historic start to his young coaching career. I believe in his third year now. So he's about 2.5 years into his coaching career. I think he has like 55 or 56 wins already. Logan McIntosh, Brody Smith, Griffin Friend. That's kind of the big three down there right now. Quentin McIntosh, Chase Newman, Caleb Barrera is kind of one of the other starters for them as well. They go probably 2 or 3 deep on their bench. So they've got a lot of guys that do some different things.
Caleb Rice.
Right. Those are guys that, check in, whether it's, maybe late in the first half or early in the second half. But it's a Fairfield team that just knows how to win basketball games, and it's a coach in Quentin Williams that, seemingly just knows how to put guys in the right spots and make things happen. I mean, coming from last year, you really thought this team would be maybe on just maybe take a step back from where they were last year, just based on everybody they graduated in the offseason. All you're hearing from Coach Williams is, this might be the best offensive team I've had in my 3 years of coaching. It's like, what? Like, you just graduated, 3 or 5 starters from last year? Well, actually, I think it was 4 of the 5 because Logan McIntosh was the only one coming back. And, he just kept saying it over and over. And, here's Brody Smith, who kind of came out of nowhere for us. I mean, we knew Griffin Friend would step into a larger role just because you saw him a little bit last season.
He was their only person off the bench that played last year. It was when it got tight late in the season. So we weren't seeing Brody Smith last year. Chase Newman played a little bit early in the season.
Quentin McIntosh, you didn't see at all last season. Caleb Rice is another guy you didn't see. I think he's a part of that sophomore class as well. And, I mean, here's Brody Smith, who I think right now, if you just look at the Shack as a whole, probably number 2 in the Player of the Year race. It looks like Alex Bradshaw over at Fayetteville Perry's having a pretty good year right now. I think he leads the league in points and blocks per game. Smith is he's like half a point less per game than him. But Smith is also a sophomore, and the kid from Fayetteville is a senior, and I think that may play into the...
Well, and then kind of what Logan McIntosh has been able to do as well.
I think you put him around third because he's about 16 points per game. He's really stepped up. I think he only averaged 12-ish last year.
Well, and he got off to a slow start and then has really turned it on. And as of late, the Western game, I know they lost, but he had a huge game over in that loss against Western. So it's a Fairfield team that, so they go undefeated 2 years ago, graduate 4 of their 5 starters. But they return the point guard. Then they come back last year. They win a district championship. Then they graduate 4 of their 5 starters. But they do graduate the point guard. But then you get the point guard's brother coming in. And it's maybe a slight drop off just because you have the 2 losses early. But it's still a very good team. And I think Coach Williams does a really good job with them. And one thing I just wanted to highlight on that game on Tuesday, the Unionda Fairfield matchup has not happened since 1997. Nice. So it's one of those games that it's kind of strange, but you want to play quality opponents to boost your stuff in the RPI. So I think maybe that could be why. But it's definitely going to be an interesting matchup for Tuesday, and then again on Friday. So this is it's once again not necessarily a must win for Fairfield. It kind of depends on what happens on Tuesday when North
Right.
Adams plays Fayetteville, though. If North Adams beats Fayetteville, it would be a really nice to win for Fairfield, because then that would give them a 1-game advantage when they've got to go to Fayetteville on the 31st.
And that'd be one of the kind of the interesting things to look at, because let's say North Adams beats Fayetteville, but Fayetteville beats Fairfield the second time around, so they both have 2 losses. But for Fairfield, both of those losses are from Fayetteville. Do they split the league, or does the Shack do head to head, or kind of how does that work?
Split it, because you got the 13 games now. One team knows. Actually, both teams probably know at that point on who the better of the 2 teams would be. But no, it's a split, because there's been years in the SVC, it's been a long time, where the top team, I still have no idea how, it was Piketon. Piketon Westfall. It was 15 years ago. And Piketon beat Westfall twice, actually beat them 3 times, because they beat them in the district final too. Went to state, but they had lost 2 league games. I think they lost to St. Trace and Adena that year. So it was just, they ended up splitting the league.
Something similar happened like with Westfall, like 4 years ago in a different sport.
Yeah.
But I mean, for North Adams, like you said, at Fayetteville on Tuesday, so that's a big one in terms of the Shack 2 race. Looking back into this North Adams Fairfield matchup, it was a 59-50 win over Fairfield for the Green Devils last year, and we were there for that one. And at that time, it was the first Shack loss of the season, and I believe the first Shack loss in the career.
Yeah, it was their first loss last year too.
Oh, it was their first loss last year as well. So the first regular season loss for Coach Quentin Williams last year. And if I remember right, I think it was a big night for Jace Rothwell. I don't think it was the best game for Branson Copus, and Rothwell really stepped up in a big way. I think he had at least 20 points in that one. But over the course of this season, Schweikert and Rothwell have been kind of the mainstays for North Adams. And you look at a player like Carson Osborne, who had a really big game against South Webster, and that's kind of where I'm going with this. He's kind of been the X factor for the Green Devils, but like not in the way you would expect, as in games where he has scored 20 or more points, they are 0-2. And that was against Hillsborough and against South Webster. In those 2 games, he was 9 of 19 from beyond the arc, which is just a crazy thing to think about, that your third leading scorer in his best games are big games as well. So it seems like Osborne really steps up in big moments for them. The South Webster game was always going to be an uphill battle, and at one point they trailed by double digits in the second half, and Osborne was a big part in them coming back. And you lose on 2 free throws in the last 6 seconds, so it's not, and it's on the road as well. But for North Adams, it's outside of the conference, and they've been really dominant in the Shack. They had the 4-point win over Eastern Brown, which I think is probably one we could have recapped. But they had the 4-point win at home over Eastern Brown to sweep that season series on Friday. But we talked about how they seemingly have kind of a, they got to get past Fayetteville and Fairfield this week, but they've got a pretty solid lead, with Eastern Brown having now 3 league losses. So they've got a 3-game advantage on the Warriors. Once again, a big week for North Adams this week in the conference. But this should be another good one. Like we've said it a few times, that North Adams, Fairfield, Eastern Brown, and Fayetteville are kind of what we think are the top 4 teams in the Shack, regardless of division. So it's always nice. And just the way the schedule worked out, they're all playing each other in like a 2-week stretch. But this should be another good one in the Shack this week.
You want some good comparisons from last year?
Go ahead.
So on January 20th last year, North Adams lost to South Webster to move to 9-4 overall. They were also 6-0 in the Shack play. That next week, they beat Fayetteville Perry, and then they won at Fairfield.
So did they just copy and paste their schedule from last year?
So
did they play?
It's a little different, but
I'm guessing. Well, the snow stuff didn't help, but I'm guessing the Minford game was way earlier in the season for North Adams, if I remember correctly.
It was early in the season. It was December 12th.
Yeah,
last year
one was January 12th or something. Like it was a lot later.
But they sat at 9-4, undefeated in the Shack play. They finished the season 21-5, undefeated in the Shack play, which got them to the regional semifinal. So they're a team last year around this time flip the switch. Can they do it again this year? They've got 4 of the 5 guys back from last year that started. You know, maybe this is the week that they really turn things on. Maybe last week was it when you beat Eastern Brown. So it's funny that they're at the exact same record going in. It's going to be around the same date. Yeah. Then same teams coming up in the cross league matchups, but yeah, they're a team that in that Fairfield game last year, and this is just kind of if you've seen some of the stats from North Adams this year, Schweikert and Rothwell combined to go 14 for 16 from the free throw line in that one last year.
Well,
so
Rothwell was like
10 for 10.
Yeah, I was going to say Rothwell did pretty good from the stripe that night.
But yeah, so it's kind of crazy to compare the 2 seasons from last year to this year, especially when you think in a way they've gotten off to a kind of disappointing start. But if you look at last year, they're right where they're right where they want to be. So should be an interesting one down there in Shack Action on Friday.
Shack Action.
Shaction.
It's just Shaction. It's just one word. All right, we'll go on to another big conference matchup, this one a night later, and we'll have this one live on the broadcast side of things. Talking about the Shack, we're talking about, league play coming down the stretch in the back half of the league schedule. We're going to move on to the SOC 2, where they're just kind of getting started, right? They're not even at the halfway point of the league schedule. We're talking about Symmes Valley at Eastern Pike this Saturday. For Symmes Valley, 8-3, 2-0 in league play. They are at Fairland on Tuesday, so kind of a tough matchup. That 8-3 overall record not going to probably be the same come Saturday, and neither is the 2-0 in conference play as they're home against South Gallia on Friday. But for Symmes Valley, as it stands at 8-3, they're at 8-3 after starting 1-3, so they've been able to rattle off. I don't know why I put 7 in a row. Oh, because that's right. I can't count. Sorry. But they've won 7 in a row since starting 1-3, and those 3 losses are to Notre Dame, West, and Minford. So they've lost to 3 really quality opponents, but like I said, they've rattled off 7 straight wins. Obviously led by senior Ethan Smith, close to the 30-point per game mark at 27 points per game. And junior Tanner Korn right around 10 points per game, as is Bronx Carpenter, only a freshman at 9.5 points per game. They also have 4 other guys that are averaging at least 4 points per game. So they've got a filled-out roster that's led by Ethan Smith, off to an 8-3 start. For me, I'm just excited to actually get eyes on this Symmes Valley team.
Yeah, it's a team that I saw them last year down at the Convo. Smith had a pretty decent game down there, but I didn't realize how much they had coming back, with Tanner Korn, because Korn had a nice game that day as well. And then you throw in Bronx Carpenter as a freshman who's obviously gotten off to a nice start in his career. But Ethan Smith he's been the dude so far, and kind of in our entire coverage area of I saw this thing.
He's the leading scorer in our coverage area, is he not?
Yeah.
I mean, him or Kaiser, I would assume, are up there.
Right. It's
Roberts probably is in averages, but probably not total, just because of the beginning of the season.
He got off to a kind of a slow start when he came in.
I think Schubert would be up there if Roberts didn't come back. Before Roberts came back, Schubert was going crazy.
Well, I think Montgomery and Kaiser maybe cancel each other out, probably put themselves.
Do they though? They're scoring like.
So I said maybe.
They score like 80. They've probably scored 80. What, three times, 4 times? They did it against Symmes Valley.
I'm just saying, like one night, one of them might score 30, and the other one only score 20.
Right.
Only.
I gotcha.
Yeah. But
Ethan Smith definitely in the top 5. Well, like if you look at your thread on SC Ohio Preps of.
He's in there the most.
Right. He's the most, the guy that's in there the most frequently, is it's 25 and up, and he's definitely had the most 25-plus point games in the Southeast this season.
Stadelman from Warren's the only other one that I could think of that isn't necessarily in our coverage area, even in the Southeast, that could even be close to him on a points per game average. I would say Kaiser Montgomery, probably the closest. I think Roberts, if you factor in just the last few games. But yeah, Smith's been outstanding for them. It seems like really since that game 4 against Minford, they've kind of let him loose, and since then he's kind of gone off, and that's why he's averaging 27 points a game. And you mentioned the big win over Western in Latham on Friday, so they're a team that it's not just a one-man team. that one man is very good, but they have some nice depth, as you mentioned, the several players averaging over 4 points a game. If you've got a bunch of different guys that can contribute, that makes you a lot more difficult to guard, and I think that's why they're off to this 8-3 start.
I was just trying to count 3, 4. So many 25. I think 4. So he's been in there 4 times, which isn't as many as I thought. But I mean, that's 4 times in 11 games.
53 and a 45. And isn't there like a 36 in there? Because I think I have that.
Yes.
Yeah.
He has had 2 of the top 3 performances and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 3 of the top 6.
Yeah. So not a bad start, but
I think Montgomery might have more than him. I think Montgomery has scored between like 20 and 25 or 25 and 30.
Mm-hmm.
What did I say? He had 4.
Yeah.
Talk about something else.
Well, and then just kind of moving on to, you got to go to Beaver, and you're going to face Eastern. That is going to come off a really tough one on Friday. They've got Oak Hill at home. They're at South Gallia on Tuesday, which, as I mentioned, is not the easiest place to play.
Montgomery has 4 as well.
Okay. Eastern Pike with a nice win over Wheelersburg to start the season. They do have losses to South Webster, which was a substantial one, and then that one against Northwest, which I think most of us would think it was an upset.
As of now, I mean, we'll see. Mm-hmm. We'll hopefully get eyes on Northwest here in the next month or so. But as of now, I think calling that an upset win is pretty accurate.
Yeah, I think so, but as we said, we'll
and they're
see
coached
more.
Well,
yeah, we'll see more Northwest later on, but nice bounce back win over Ironton St. Joe, who's off to a solid start to their season. Tucker Leist, Cade Leist, you got Declan Davis, Boston Webb, Davis coming in from Piketon. You've got some really good athletes. You got Wyatt Richardson, Aiden Warner, who is undersized, but I wouldn't be surprised if he was the one put on Ethan Smith and try to slow him down. Both of these teams will get up and down. This should be a really fun game to watch on Saturday, so make sure you tune in for that one because it's going to be a really good display. Now, it wouldn't surprise me. Tucker Leist was on him a good bit as well. Leist, he'll be a little more aggressive defensively, so he can get himself in foul trouble, as we saw in that game in their 2-point win over Western a couple weeks ago, right before the snow hit. But he's one of the better passers in the area. He also, in transition on pull-up threes, is really good. Boston Webb has really grown as a sophomore, both physically and, as a player, he's grown as well. But Declan Davis brings them some really, some toughness as well. He can score it inside and out. Does a good job cutting and does a good job scoring inside, but definitely gives them some needed toughness after graduating a nice senior class from last year. So this is a Eastern team 9-2 off to a really good start. I think this is going to be, depending on that Oak Hill game, this could be a big time must win for Eastern Pike if they drop that Oak Hill game.
Right. I mean, it's another one of those. I think every conference game in the SOC2 is going to count this year. I think, you're going to, it wouldn't surprise me if whoever wins the conference has to go 7-3, mm-hmm. right? I think there could be one game that separates, maybe 1 or 2 games that separates first and, 5th place. Because I think South Gallia might have, 6, 7, 8 league losses just because the rest of the league just seems so balanced. And it doesn't seem like it doesn't seem like it because there's not one team that's just like, oh yeah, they're going to win the league. Or there's not even 2 teams. There's not 3 teams. There's literally 5 teams right now that I think you could make a case for them winning the SOC2. And that's what makes high school basketball fun, is the uncertainty of, trying to predict these. It's not fun when you're like, well, yeah, it's between these 2 teams. And when they play each other, that's pretty much the only games that matter in the conference. It's pretty much every night in the SOC2 counts. And we're going to get a little bit of a glimpse of that this Saturday. And this is a game that we were going to do. You and Carson were going to do the Saturday of all the snow. It got pushed back, luckily, to another Saturday, which is going to allow us to make the trip down to Eastern and see the Eagles for what we think right now is going to be the first time of 2 in about 4 days.
Yeah,
because they're at Western the following Tuesday, and we think we might get down there to see that one, as that was a 2-point game the last time around. So yeah, excited to see Symmes Valley. Excited to get eyes on with Eastern this year as they graduated a few big name guys from last year.
Some highlight players.
Yeah, some highlight players as
We
well.
always get some nice highlights now. Shout out TikTok for being back. We might use our TikTok account again for the next 270 days or whatever they got till it shuts back down.
And I'm not sure if I said it on air. I know I said it, but it may have been when we weren't on yet. Looking at that loss to Northwest, like it's kind of like flipped from last year. And I say that now, but Northwest could be, doing kind of the same that they did last year. Whereas, right before and this isn't right before the tournament, but Eastern had that win at Northwest right before the tournament that kind of shocked everybody. And I think that's a big reason why we didn't have Northwest going very far in the OHSAA
and I think
tournament.
originally Northwest didn't want us streaming their games because every once in a while we're just horrendous luck for teams like
Jackson girls, Eastern Brown boys.
And Northwest until the district finals.
We had their only two losses or two of their three losses that year because really both their losses last year were bad.
Yeah,
I mean, you lose to Waverly at Waverly, you lose to home against Eastern. Where I was going with it is that now you think Eastern's maybe the district hopeful in Division 6, and you lose on the road to Northwest. So it's just kind of maybe payback from last year for the guys returning, which, at the varsity level is like one guy in Ivan Ely for Northwest from last year. But obviously, we talked about how Armbrister was on the bench and did some good things in JV last year for Northwest. And then Brendan Weiss, maybe doesn't have a dog in the fight, but seemingly one of the top scorers.
Maybe they talked to him. Yeah, maybe they talked a little bit when he was playing for Valley.
One of the top scorers for Northwest as well. So but Symmes Valley and Eastern this week. Like I said, excited to get my first look at both of these really competitive SOC2 teams. So. You ready to move on to the quick picks for the boys' side?
Yes, sure.
We've got about 30 seconds before we hit the next full minute. So the games we're going to be doing this week, a big one in the FAC with Jackson at Miami Trace, West at Wheelersburg, Washington Courthouse at Hillsborough, Fairfield at Uniota, and Western at Northwest. So always going to be fun when we throw a SOC2 game in there, as that one is a complete toss-up. So we've got about 10 seconds now. And after this, we will move on to the girls segment. So we are going to start with Jackson at Miami Trace.
Size matters. And I think that's partially why Miami Trace won the first meeting down at Jackson. I believe it was a 9-point game over there. And I think the zone for Miami Trace will make the difference in this. Jackson doesn't shoot the ball particularly well from three. Their offense is kind of an enigma at this point. They scored 30 points, and then they scored 81 in their next game after that, and then they beat a good Chillicothe team. But I'm going to take Miami Trace in this one, and a tight one.
Yeah, I mean, Miami Trace kind of seemingly played a little sluggish against Courthouse last week. They ended up pulling away with the win. I think it was like an 8-point win, which probably wouldn't have covered the spread if there was one. But they won down at Jackson. Adam Guthrie is seemingly... I'm not sure who can guard him. I'm really looking forward to that Miami Trace and Minford matchup in Fayette County come February. But as of now for Jackson, I picked them in the preseason, but I'm just not sure anybody can stop Miami Trace in the FAC. So I'm going to roll with the Panthers as well. All right, game 2, West at Wheelersburg.
Wheelersburg, another kind of enigma where they don't play defense. It's just kind of not a big fan of defenses. They gave up 81, 92, and then 71 points in their 3 games last week. So this one, take the over. I think West, if they play their 1-3-1 and they do it in an effective way, I think they can cause some issues. I think Will Kegley at the top of that zone, but he's got to stay out of foul trouble. Both games I've seen them this year, he's been in foul trouble. I'm going to take West with the upset on the road.
See, that's... I want to pick West really bad and you've seen him in person, so I should probably go with you because you've seen them both in person. I haven't seen West yet. Obviously, they have Wolfenbarker from Northwest. Will Kegley's had a really good start to his junior year. If it was at West, I think I'd pick them. I'm just going to roll with Wheelersburg. I think they've just played such a tough schedule that it's really hard to kind of gauge how they are with the rest of the SOC3. We'll get a good glimpse of that this week, but I'm going to roll with the Pirates for now. All right, back to the FAC, Courthouse at Hillsborough.
I have no idea on this because Hillsborough has the guard advantage. Tate Davis seems like he's playing well.
Jack Allen.
Allen has been playing well.
Blake over from East Clinton at the 5.
I didn't see his name in in the clippings at all this week. So I don't know if they have the size to match up. I think if Justin Everhart has a big game for Washington and they can win this game, I'm going to take the guard play for Hillsborough in a tight one. So give me Hillsborough.
Yeah, it was like a 17-point win for Courthouse the first time around. I looked at it. Courthouse shot 6 for 13 from 3 that night. I'm not sure they can replicate that. It's at Hillsborough. These are two really weird teams when you try to do like transitive property or whatever. You're kind of giving me a layup here with just rolling with Courthouse because I think that's a pretty solid pick, but I'm also going to go with Hillsborough as well. I don't know. I like Hillsborough more, and I think they're playing better basketball than they were when they lost to Courthouse. So, all right, game 4, Fairfield at Unioda.
As I mentioned, first time since 1997. I should have saved that for this, but first time since 1997, these two has matched up. I think it's going to be a fun guard matchup. Just see what Jackson Zickafoos can do to kind of heat up Griffin Friend and try to force Fairfield into playing a little faster than what they want. But as Coach Williams has said, they have they're really talented offensively, but I think Unioda wins this game at home. I think KB Perkins has a big game for this one.
Yeah, I mean, I hate being a homer, but like Unioda seems to do a really good job at shutting down teams' top scorers when they're a guard. We're not going to talk about Adam Guthrie, but it seems like when the other team's top scorer, one of their top scorers is a guard, look at Grady Stewart, they just seem to do a really good job at shutting them down. I'm talking about Brody Smith, obviously, in that case. Logan McIntosh, not going to be an easy matchup for, KB Perkins or Dawson Mitchell, who whichever big is in for Unioda, but I'm going to roll with the Shermans as well. I think maybe they're just, I want to say they're deeper, but they're really not. Either is Fairfield's pretty deep as well, but I'm going to roll with the Shermans. All right, we've got about 40 seconds. Western at Northwest.
Once again, size matters. So I'm going to take Northwest in this. I think Aiden Armbruster is going to be a major issue, although Cam Janes has been awesome so far this year for Western. So give me Northwest.
I mean, Western lost to Symmes Valley, and it didn't sound like Drew Hagee played a lot. It seemed like he picked up a few fouls pretty quickly that kind of limited his playing time in the second half. I think Western's pretty upset they lost to Symmes Valley. Cam Janes had a big one against the Vikings. I'm not going to waste any time with this pick. I'm going to roll with Western. So we've got some pretty solid variety this week. We had some pretty solid variety last week. Luckily, Portsmouth came in clutch and
that helped you out. And
only had me losing the week by 1 instead of 3. So
well, you mentioned, as soon as you mentioned Logan McIntosh being a tough matchup for Unioda, I could see Unioda with a lot of zone in that one because
Fairfield. You don't think they could shoot him out of it?
I mean, I think with what Zickafoos and Cutright can do at the top of the zone can be super active for Unioda. But I think with Blake Fitch, Blake Hoops, with Hoops and Perkins, they're not the best defensively. So it's going to, Logan McIntosh is going to be a really tough matchup for one of those two. Now, you could throw Blake Fitch on him, but that's almost a 5-inch difference, even though Blake Fitch is an absolute bulldog defensively. I do think there's going to be some weird defensive matchups in that game. So you mentioned Unioda's bench. Jack Welch has played really well for them lately, and so that one could be I think that one's got a chance to be a sleeper for a really interesting matchup.
I've seen both teams. I don't think Perkins would match up very well with Logan McIntosh.
I don't think so at all.
Because Logan McIntosh plays what is he, 6'4"?
Yeah.
He plays like a collegiate 6'4" player. Like around here, if you're 6'4", you're big, slow center. He's not like that. He plays a 6'4" in college, that's a shooting guard, or maybe a small forward. Which is, he can dribble, he can, rush to the rack, he can rebound, he can shoot threes. I'm not sure maybe Perkins is equipped with the
especially with the knee injury.
Right, to keep up with somebody that quick, which I think could cause Unioda problems, especially off the dribble. So, it'd be interesting to see if they put, maybe
I think it might be a Blake Hoops.
Maybe a smaller weight guy, but in terms of length, similar as Perkins. You mentioned Jack Welch, maybe Isaac Coy, a guy you throw on him. I mean, we'll see.
You could throw Caden Cutright on him just to, he's got the length, but that'll be interesting. The more you talk matchups, I think that ends up being a more interesting game.
I will say, if Brody Smith, he's averaging 17, I'd be surprised if he gets to 15 points.
Right,
because Unioda just seems like if there is a team that has a guard that is clearly good at shooting threes, they're just like, all right, well, we may not win, but you're not scoring.
Yeah, you're just not shooting them. It's just, I think, I talked to Coach Fitch before the St. Trace game where he really just said, we're going to run them off the line. They're not going to shoot threes. well, I'm guessing this will be a pretty similar
It's be a good
idea.
coaching matchup.
Yeah.
And it's, we talked about it with Buechler and Williams. It's kind of the same with Combs and Williams. I mean, a guy that's established himself. Buechler's obviously been at Eastern Brown for nearly 3 decades, but, Combs now at his second school, I think 3 or 4 district titles at Vinton County, looking to do the same thing at Uniota. And then you have a guy who's on the come up and about as best the way,
Right.
It's not too often you start off your head coaching career like 55-5 or whatever
Right.
he is. So, he'll be at the 100 win mark, seemingly in no time if they keep winning games in Leesburg as they have been. So, you got anything else for the boys' side? Any other games you want to? We can kind of, since we've made our picks, if there's any quick things you want to jot down about any of the games we picked.
I think that Western at Northwest
I'm
game.
surprised you picked Northwest.
I
know they're 2-0, and Western is 0-2. But
I mean, I think Western is just very undersized.
Remember what happened the last time I said I was surprised you picked a team? Minford beat Wheelersburg girls by like 15.
It's 12, but yeah, that's one of our breakdowns we're going to talk about here in a minute. But yeah, it's I don't know.
The West Wheelers. You picked this was the first time you've picked the slate. I think maybe since the first week. The West Wheelersburg game is kind of an interesting one as well because I think if we only had 30 seconds to pick 5 games, maybe you pick Wheelersburg just because you don't have a lot of time to think about it. But the more you think about it, it's like, well, Wheelersburg didn't do too well with size against Minford, so and then that could be the case again with West.
West rebounds well. Yeah, so I don't know, maybe, but. Also, if they don't fix that backside part of their zone for West, that could be where like a Landon McGraw kind of picks them apart in a way that Christian Coppin did for Valley.
I think Wheelersburg is a little bigger than maybe you think on paper, just because their taller guys don't play like they don't really have a big that Kane Stanley maybe, but I mean against Minford he played way less than he did against Harvest Prep earlier in the season. So yeah, that'll be. What day is that game? Is that Tuesday or is that later?
I believe that's Tuesday.
Okay, that's cool. Yeah, that'll be. I'll probably keep up with that one just to see what's going on with the 2 of the 3 orange teams in the SOC 3. So
yeah,
they're all orange and they all start with W. So.
Yes.
All right, we can move on to the girls basketball.
I added something.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
So what? So the girls basketball. Yeah. Okay. The girls basketball segment of the show. We've got one game. We're going to recap a team of the week, and then we're also going to go over one of the classics from I think today. It was They're on Monday, which is, or sorry,
from Sunday.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was just because of what happened. I was kind of following along with it, and but just kind of bouncing to it. I don't know exactly when the Classic of the Country started, and it's played up at Berlin Highland, and it's over Martin Luther King Day weekend. I don't know if it started around the same time as Flying to the Hoop did at Kettering Fairmont over on the boys' side, but there's also the Classic in the City this same weekend. I think there's also another boys' Classic. So, I mean, obviously we had the 2 last week, not the Battle Series, clearly, but the Dave Young Classic over at North Adams. And what was the one called at Shawnee?
Oh, the Battle Series?
No, not
the Buckeye Elite Showcase?
Yeah, the Buckeye Elite Showcase. So, so there's a lot of stuff over Martin Luther King Day weekend. So we're doing the show on Sunday. Now, there's still, I think Fairland might play on Monday. I know Uniota plays on Monday. Portsmouth plays on Monday. I think there might be another one, but like yesterday on Saturday, Waterford won up in the Class of the Country. Uniota won at the Classic in the City, which was a big showcase for Miley Smith, that she had 33 in that one, and a come from behind win over Marysville. But like, even though they lost today, Fairland played a tight game with Mount Notre Dame out of Cincinnati. If you would have told me 5 years ago that a team from the Southeast would play Mount Notre Dame and they wouldn't be the only one playing Mount Notre Dame, I would never have believed you, because Mount Notre Dame was like rolling off of just state title after state title, and not the. My one interaction with the coach from Mount Notre Dame was he's just okay. I don't care if he watches. I don't think he would, but like, he goes by doctor. Like he has a doctorate. He's like, oh, you're calling me a doctor.
Some of them are, yeah.
Like the people with the
I mean,
doctorate.
they earn it. But,
yeah, but still, if you like tell people that you have to be called doctor,
yeah.
I just like it's whatever. So, but Mount Notre Dame is one of the best programs in the state, and Fairland played them today. Now, Portsmouth also plays them later in the season. So the fact that Portsmouth and Fairland both play them this year, I think just says so much about what the Southeast has been able to do program wise. And it's, on the come up as far as girls basketball goes in the Southeast, as obviously Waterford has done it for a while, but and Uniota plays the Laurel School that Portsmouth beat earlier in the season. That was a switch. It was supposed to be Lakota West, and then they switched because Portsmouth, I think, didn't want to play the Laurel School twice, and so they will play Lakota West, and Uniota will play the Laurel School instead. So, but the big one was Portsmouth today. Now on Max Preps, they rank the teams based on who you play and wins, losses, whatever. So in the state coming into the game, Portsmouth was ranked 10th, no matter what the division was. Kettering Fairmont was ranked 12th, and Kettering Fairmont last season went to the Elite Eight in Division One, where Portsmouth obviously made it to the Final Four in Division Three. But still, Division Three, Division One, that's a big difference between the two. Well, today, Portsmouth beats Kettering Fairmont in double overtime, 48-45. So they were down by 3 late. They banked in a 3 to help force overtime. They got a defensive stop right after. So they end up going into the second overtime, and they win that game. Don't have the stats now. I mean, more will come out about the game as time goes on, but that's just a great win for Portsmouth, for the Southeast District. That was the only game I saw on their schedule. Maybe tomorrow with Lakota West, maybe they could lose that, but that's a game where that might be the best win for a team in the Southeast District ever, because of just you're playing a team that's probably a favorite to get to the Final Four in Division One or Division Two, whatever they're at. I'm guessing they're one still because Fairmont's pretty big. But yeah, this is a Portsmouth team, super talented. Like I said, we don't have the stats from it, but this is just an amazing win for that for Coach Hughes and that program. So big shout out to them. We'll see them in a couple of weeks when they take on Fairland, but. Yeah, it's a really special team for Portsmouth.
Yeah, I mean, right. It's a team that finished in the Final Four last season, and now with the expansions and the divisions, the only thing you can go further than the Final Four with is winning a state title. So I think it's a state title. It's a team that's optimistic they can make a run to the state title game and win the state title game, right? We've had a couple of OVC teams with Fairland, which looking forward to that matchup, as you said, in a couple of weeks.
I think technically SOSA was around when Vinton County got to the finals.
They were.
Yeah.
Yep, that was my senior year in high school in Vinton County. Southeast District girls has had a pretty good run the last 5-ish years.
I mean, we're huge on covering the TVC at this point, so I think we should claim those Waterford teams. But I think Waterford's got a chance to be. They're going to be one of the favorites in Division 7. So, and then really, we got a Fairfield Union that's undefeated in Division 4. Fairland, do they? I think we get 3 teams out. Do they go to the Southwest and maybe make it a twofer in teams getting to the Final Four from our area? But or do they maybe take the challenge of Portsmouth on and try to get them to try to make it to their third straight? So it's going to be really interesting to see how that Division 5 tournament plays out. I think we've got a chance to have some really good representation from the Southeast and the SOSA area, as well as Marietta won a game today that they were losing to a really good team as well. So they're probably going to go into the tournament undefeated in Division 3. Now, Division 3, you've also got an Athens team with 2 losses, a Uniota team with 3 losses, and a really good Sheridan team as well. So, I mean, and that's just to get to the district final, because you don't even win a district in the 6-team district that is Division 3. So, I mean, it's a really talented, really talented area in the Southeast District right now in girls basketball. So it'll be exciting to follow that. Moving on to, our one rundown really was, Minford 36, Wheelersburg 24. Wasn't the prettiest game down at Wheelersburg on Thursday night, but super competitive. I thought that both teams played really hard and were played to the extent that they were allowed to. It was one of those games where you kind of want the whistle to be tight early and then loosen up, but it was loose, 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 and then tightened up. And by the time it tightened up, it was not the prettiest because it's the way it was officiated. The players played the game the way, not a ton of skill was able to be shown in the play.
Yeah.
And it was just, I think Minford used a little more depth and their length as well. As I stopped keeping track of their block shots in that third quarter, but in the first half, I believe they had 6 block shots. I know they added on to that. I kept track of Lindsey Williams' block shots, but they were definitely over 10 blocks on the night, and that makes a big difference when Wheelersburg didn't shoot the ball particularly well. But overall, it was just really showing depth for Minford in the game. Marley Pendleton had 8 points, 7 rebounds. Lexi Conkle with 8 points. Kerrigan Davis, a freshman, with 8 points. Lindsey Williams, only 4 points on the day, but 16 rebounds, 5 blocks. And Maggie Reisner with 4 points, 7 rebounds, 4 assists. Ava Cronin made a big jump shot, which was something she doesn't look very comfortable doing, but she was able to knock down a big 15-footer in that game. Lainey Howard had a really big play where Wheelersburg had temporarily taken the lead in the third quarter, and then a quick press breaker, and then Howard scored coming off the bench as well. Bailey Hammonds gave them some good minutes. It's just when you're able to go deep while playing really good defense like Minford's able to do, it can help you, make a difference late in the game, and that's what they were able to do. Is they had a big fourth quarter. Lexi Conkle had a big 3 in that fourth quarter. Kerrigan Davis, as a freshman, really kind of kept them above water throughout that first half. And then that's when Marley Pendleton, Lexi Conkle kind of took over in that second half. Reisner finished strong late. But they ended up, carrying on. They had a big win over Lynchburg Clay on Saturday, a 28-point win, showing that offense that we kind of saw in that Symmes Valley game where it looked like, oh, this is a better offensive team than what they've been. They've dealt with some injuries, but that defense will always play for Minford. That is why they're at 6-4, 2-0 right now in the SOC 3. On Monday, they play Waverly. As we said, we normally tape on Monday, taping on Sunday this week. So you'll see that result on Tuesday when this comes out. Is they play Waverly on Monday, at Lucasville Valley on Thursday, and then they play a 13-0 Fayetteville team on Saturday at Eastern Brown. That's a 1:00 game. That should probably be the game of the day over there. For Wheelersburg, they dropped to 10-2, 2-1 in the SOC 3. Mia Vastine, their senior, 12 points, 6 rebounds, 4 assists, 6 steals in the game. She was all over the floor. She probably had the most skilled play. She had a really nice hesitation, like she was going to cross over, like an in-out move, good drive, and got an and one in that one. Peyton May had 6 points for them. And they really only scored 6 points besides those two. So it was a really tough night scoring the ball. But like Callie DeHart, Ava Artrip, both freshmen, each of them knocked down a big 3 in that second half when it was still a tight game. I know they had a nice game against Waverly, both of them. I know Derek had them. I think they both were in the interview with Vastine. So, they've got a tough one, which we probably would have done the breakdown for if we release this on Monday. But Wheelersburg at West on Monday. That's a game to watch for sure in the Southeast District on Monday. I don't know for sure if this is the schedule. On ours, it's only got them against South Webster on Thursday. Max Preps has them at South Webster on Wednesday and then hosting South Webster on Thursday, which would be kind of weird, but with the snow, you kind of never know at this point. So they will play South Webster at some point during the week. And then they've got Western Brown, who I believe is 9-5. on Saturday at Eastern Brown. That's going to be the nightcap over there. So that one will be an interesting one as well. So Wheelersburg drops 10-2, Minford 6-4. That'll be a game to watch at Minford as well down the stretch.
Sorry, I was just trying to put together.
I know you were.
The graphics for the.
That's why I was rolling.
Yeah, I mean, for Minford, obviously that's a game last week that I unfortunately picked wrong. I think we finally got Minford on the pick'ems after their last two games. Every time we put Minford on the quick picks graphic, it was getting canceled.
Right.
Both of those were with FedHawk, and they both got canceled. As the one was due to sickness, and the other one was obviously due to the snow that happened when that game was on the graphic a couple of weeks ago. But for Wheelersburg, obviously it was kind of a tough team to figure out for us, just because we hadn't seen much of them, and there's not much online about them. You kind of have to go in person to see what they're about. We saw they had the big win over Ironton, and their overall record was pretty solid. But obviously, as you said in this one, I mean, not the highest scoring game. I mean, only 60 points combined between the two teams, which just one shy of what we had over at Courthouse.
It was just it was. I don't want to say it was on the verge of a fight, because I thought both teams held their own really well, but it was just so physical, and like you couldn't do anything. Like the ball gets across half court, two hands on you, no matter what. Ball goes inside. I don't know what it took for a foul. Like it ended up being like, as I mentioned, 10 blocks, and probably most of Lindsay Williams were clean because of her size advantage. But really, like not a lot of free throws shot in the game. I mean, Emma Smith for Wheelersburg got fouled so hard, like she almost got flipped out of the play. They called it, but it was just such a physical game, and it was hard to get a read on either team. And I think it probably benefited Minford just because of kind of their experience in those types of games. But for Wheelersburg, with like DeHart and Archer, the two freshmen that come off the bench, they bring a lot of energy, but not the biggest players right now. Where Vastine, with a little more experience, more strength, she wasn't really phased in the game, but that was about it. Like the other, they had three starters that didn't score. It's a Wheelersburg team that I think maybe the length may have bothered them a little bit more than what they anticipated. But I'm still interested in that second game down at Minford. I think that one has a chance to be a little more interesting and a little higher scoring than this one, as this was kind of I think I know it's a tighter officiating crew the second time, as I was told that on Friday. So that'll be an interesting one.
All right, and then we'll move on to our team of the week from this past week. And I'm not sure if any other team of the week will top this week's team of the week, unless they win like a state title or something to that effect. For this week, it's Green, right? 12-1, 2-0 in the SOC 3. They go 2-0 on the week with a pretty lopsided win over New Boston on Tuesday. And then, we both predicted this. They're now the 1 in 126-1 over the last 10 years in the SOC 1 as they snap Notre Dame's historic streak. I'm not sure where that lands them in terms of all-time.
I would say it's got to be in the top 5.
Winning records in conferences.
If Afrocentrics was like, what was it, 144?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, I know it's a lot. I mean, 18 games is still a lot, but like, really, when you get to that number,
anything over about 80 is. I mean, even if you
69 is impressive. Don't even like. Hey,
I mean, if you're talking, especially
we had like 3 close games in that.
Especially in like conferences now, where you're only playing 10 league games in a year. I mean, if you win a gold ball 4 years in a row, that's impressive. And we're talking about 40 games. Well, they went 126.
10 straight years.
Right. We looked it up, I think, last week, and it was like, it's officially been 10 years because their last loss was like January 2nd of, it wouldn't have been that close, but like January 5th of 2015. Yeah. So over 10 years of dominance in the SOC 1 finally comes to an end. And I mean, it's not like you lost to an undeserving team, right? You lose to a 12-1 Green team that, in terms of points per game, led by Abby Knapp. We talked about her last week, how she scored over 500 points as a freshman, obviously set to do that and more this season as a sophomore. Close to 30 points, 28.5 points per game, nearly averaging a 2020, like 28 points per game, 19 rebounds, 5.5 assists. I mean, Maddie Hayslip, a sophomore, so her and Knapp going to be side by side for the entire duration of their high school basketball careers. She's at 16 points per game. I don't think she was at that last year, so I think she's
well,
really
that was on the
game.
week. That was on the week.
Oh, that was on the week. Okay,
so
I was getting ready to say
she's around
numbers,
like 13 or 14.
I was getting ready to say those numbers are crazy if that's what they're averaging.
Knapp's rebounding isn't that high, but I think her points per game is pretty close. But what I was thinking, like I wanted to kind of throw in there, like Abby Knapp is averaging like 28 points a game. Like I bet the running clock is hurting some of that, where maybe she's playing 3 quarters plus a few minutes of the fourth, where she probably doesn't play at all in the fourth in some of these games now because, like, if not, like the quarter goes so fast in the running clock. You don't realize how quick the running clock makes it until you see an entire quarter of a running clock, and it's like it was like 5-3. So, but yeah, just mentioning some more players. Ava Abrams, a junior, averaged 6.5 points a game for this week. Addison Blizzard, a sophomore. Elizabeth McBee, a freshman. So you've got 5 key players coming back. And then you got 2 seniors in Miley Brown and Miley Hunt. So out of your top 7, you've got 5 coming back. Now, without seeing them this year, I can't really tell you on how many of them are starters, but you're returning 5 of your top 7 from a team that has started off 12-1. It's always good. And your best 2 players are coming back as they're only sophomores with Abby Knapp and Maddie Hayslip. Hayslip has really done a good job of stretching the floor for them and making things a little bit easier on Abby Knapp, because if someone doesn't stretch the floor, Addison Blizzard shoots it at a pretty high level as well. But if you don't force the defenders to at least account for shooters, they're going to be able to just pack it in on Abby Knapp and make things really difficult for her to score on the interior, where she can do it off the dribble. She can stretch the floor as well. But if you get her on the post against most players in the SOC 3 or SOC 1, she's going to score more times than not. So a really good week for the Bobcats. I did like when you said the green team, because then you just kind of think it's almost like, yeah, like almost like a rec league, just because green. But yeah, Franklin Furnace green, or Ferrance green, as some people would say. For green, it's a really big win. They've got this week coming up. They've got Valley on Wednesday at home, East at home on Thursday, and then they're at Portsmouth Clay next Monday, which will be a game that we'll kind of keep track. We've looked at Clay pretty closely at times this year. They were our team of the week 1 week earlier. I don't know if they have the size and depth in that matchup, but I think Clay's done a pretty good job of bouncing back from having really low numbers over the last couple of years. So that'll be one to keep an eye on for sure as well.
All right, we've got a couple of games we're going to preview before jumping into the girls' quick picks to round out this week's show. The first game we're going to talk about, I think you alluded to it in the rundown of the Minford Wheelersburg game, what's the game you were talking about? Was West and Wheelersburg? Was that the game you were talking, or was it this one?
No, it was Minford and Wheelersburg. So
I know
West and Wheelersburg is Monday.
Right.
Yeah.
But this one, West at Waverly, I believe this would be on Thursday, probably, is when this game is going to happen. But 10-3 West making the trip to Waverly, who sits at 8-6, both 2-1 in the SOC 3.
Yeah, it's a matchup where West, I saw them against Valley, and they just utterly dominated. Their coach told me afterwards, he said, we're just not super consistent. Well, they've won 9 of their last 10. So they've been pretty consistent as of late.
1 and 2. Would that be if they've won 9 of their last 10?
1 and 2. Yeah. And their one loss in there was to Minford. So they've played well. Without really, knowing the stats on it, they're 4th in the RPI in Division 6, which I think is pretty wide open this year in the Southeast. Macy Wisman, the 6'1" sophomore, does a really good job for them. Haley Jo Carver, another sophomore. Allie Buckner, another one that they get some good contributions from their young players. you got Ava Potters that also does a good job as a senior, but the player to watch for them, Braylee Pistol, only a freshman. She can shoot it from three. She can really drive it to the hoop as well. I was really impressed with what she was able to do for them against Valley. Valley with some good length, but just they did not shoot the ball well at all in that game. And that's why it's a 40-point game. But I could see this being a much more interesting game when they match up the second time in Lucasville. But that West team, 10-3, 2-1 in the SOC 3. They have been really good over the last few years. They got to a regional final 2 years ago. They're a well coached team, and I think they're a team that you could see them in that regional level again. Maybe not this year. Maybe this year though in Division 6, but I think with their youth, with Wisman Carver, Pistol. They're a team that they're going to be solid for the next few years as well. So maybe not as huge as they've been. I think last year they started like 4 players over 5'10", and then you had the 5-foot point guard.
I mean, even a couple of years ago when it was like McDermott was there, and I can't remember who the other girl's name was that was their other big inside. But I mean, it's a team that obviously had that really good run of players, and right when that group is starting to graduate, well, here comes another couple of really solid classes for the West Side. So I think, like you said, I think it's kind of been a reload type year for them. It's not too often you start 10-3 a year after graduating. I'm assuming 3 or 4 years starting point guard and emissary, and 2 years removed from graduating a large chunk of your other players that
first
led
ever
you,
SOC 2 champions,
to a regional final appearance. So it's a West team that's really well coached, and you see a little bit of that when you look at a team that's 10-3, obviously.
Yeah, and then this Waverly team is pretty inconsistent. Like they've had some strange results. They're 8-6, 2-1 in the SOC 3, but then you see them. They end up in losses on the road to McLean, which was a 2-point game, and made Clear Creek, which I know we picked it as a quick pick last week, but I don't know if we thought it was going to be as close as it really ended up being, because it was like kind of one of those like, hey, we got to have another game in here. And but yeah, they really competed well with Amanda on the road as well. They've got 3 really talented
Southeastern too.
Yeah, that was part of the, like, to me that was kind of like one of the weird ones. They've had some different results, but I think they're a team that can compete with a lot of good teams, and that's like that McLean one really stands out to me. But Karis Reisner, a senior, has done a really good job for them. You see her consistently across the stat sheets on there. Paige O'Brien, a junior, another one. Sadie Royster, another junior. So they get some. If they can get consistent scoring out of all 3 of them, I think they were going to have definitely a chance in this, especially on their home court on the hill over in Waverly. I think this is a game to keep an eye out for on Thursday, when both of them. It looks like Derek and Brock are going to be there, so we will see. So it should be an interesting one for sure in that one. So looking forward to that.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen Waverly in person since I think this group of seniors.
We seen them last year in Jackson. We went up on the hill. Yeah.
Well, I wasn't really paying that much attention.
On your school.
We haven't had them on a broadcast since, when would that have been? I think that was the year after. So that would have been.
I haven't done them.
You haven't, right? But me and Derek did a game when they played West. It would have been, who would have been a senior that year? It was the year after Zoe Smith graduated, so.
So it was right after Volgamore came over, right?
Yeah, I think she would have been there.
Man, they've had some nice players.
I think the freshmen now would have been senior, or the seniors now would have been freshmen then. So it's been a few years since I've seen Waverly in person, but obviously Coach Bonifield, works with us pretty well. So we know they're coached well in Tigertown, and we've seen a lot of West in the postseason, along, as you mentioned, in the regular season with back-to-back SOC 2 titles over the last couple of seasons. So, well, I guess an SOC title 2 years ago and then an SOC 3 title last year.
Yeah.
But, it's a West team that has been really solid over the last couple of years. And I think Waverly traditionally, at least for the last 5-6 years, to my memory, has had pretty good girls basketball. So should be a good one in Tigertown. He said this Thursday
Yes, on Thursday.
is when that one is. So,
So
I'm
of course we're
guessing,
doing this out of order because
there you go.
yeah, I'm a
I
dummy.
think Total Media probably would have the Waverly game since it's at home. I don't know what their schedule is. So I have no
It's not
idea.
really put out beforehand.
Yeah. If you want to know if they're doing it, look.
It's always on the YouTube. Yeah.
It is, but there's not a whole lot of promoting. So I guess you just kind of have to know. But seemingly they do all of the Waverly home games, so I would assume they're doing it. But I wouldn't take my word for it necessarily. Right. So,
and then the next rundown or preview we're going to do is Huntington at Piketon. Huntington won this first one. This game is on Wednesday. Huntington won the first meeting 43-38.
Where they win it at?
In the township. But since that game on December 4th, Piketon has won 9 of 10, including a pair of wins over an Adina team that beat Huntington on Saturday by an 18. So I think this game has a chance to be kind of a sneaky good game. For Huntington, you got a 1,000-point score in Allie Baker. They are 9-4 for a reason, 6-3 in the SOC. They are the 1 in 12-1 for Green. So they have that one win, or they have that win at Green.
It was at Green too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Allie Baker averages 22.5 points a game, almost 4 steals a game. Brayley Hosworth, a freshman, 7.4 points a game, 8.8 rebounds a game. Tori Smith, 16.1 points a game. The junior point guard, she had 19 points in that first matchup where they really tried to take Baker away. Smith was able to make some big plays, had a big 3 in that game, had a 3-point play that kind of helped elevate them to that win. And then Lee McCloskey gives them some really good minutes as a senior. I think for Huntington, they compete really well. Sometimes they don't shoot the ball as well. They did not shoot the ball well against Adina, and then Adina did some really good stuff on the offensive end as well. So that was kind of how they were able to make a difference in this. This is a big game RPI wise, as Huntington has a substantial advantage over Piketon in the RPI. Just kind of I think that Green game probably has a big reason for that. But Piketon coming in at 10-5, 6-2 in the SVC. As I mentioned, winners of 9 of their last 10. So they started off 1-4, and we're really coming off a nightmare game at Miami Trace. Just played horrendous. I think they only scored 20 points in the game. It was like 52-20. And that Miami Trace team is solid, but not like, I think if they played again, I would probably take Piketon in that game.
When like Piketon, you could kind of include Piketon a little bit into that odd outcome categories. I think they only beat Eastern by 4 this past weekend, which a win is a win. I mean, you can't really criticize a win. I believe it was on the road as well, which, Piketon to Eastern's kind of like Unio to Zane Trace, kind of in terms of distance.
You still have a little bit of rivalry there. But yeah, that wouldn't kind of surprise me.
I would have expected Piketon to win by double digits. Right. But once again, you don't have to please what the public thinks. You just got to win the game. It doesn't matter if you win every game by 1 point. I mean, you just got to win the game, which they did. So
yeah, and these averages are from like a little over a week ago, so I think they are a little bit different, especially Jalen Forbes. But they're very sophomore heavy. Layla Kelly about 12.5 points a game. Jalen Forbes, have her at 11.6, but I would say she's over 12. She had a big week this week. Reese Shanks, 7.1 points a game. All 3 of them are sophomores. Hayden Daniels is another sophomore that gives them some really good minutes. April Johnson, a senior, 6.8 points a game. Danica Ritchie, another senior. They mix their sophomores and seniors pretty well. And this is a Piketon team that they've been playing well. If Piketon wins this game, that would put them at 7-2 in SVC play. They would still play Uniota again, but Huntington and Adina both play Uniota again as well. So that would give them a leg up on second place in the SVC, which kind of is, you don't want to say like that's what they're playing for at this point, but that's a little bit of what you're playing for at this time with how talented Uniota is for the next couple of years. So this is a big game in the SVC. I think we're going to have coverage down there. It looks like Derek's going to be there. so we'll see on Wednesday. Should get some good coverage. And like you said, it's being at Piketon. You would think that this one likely will be streamed as well. So I think this one will be has a chance to be a really interesting matchup. As a 5-point game the first time, and then we're going to talk about it here in just a minute.
Yeah, I mean, it's another one of those. The SVC, and I like, not for you and Yoda, but for the rest of the SVC, it's kind of unfortunate, like the run Unioda is going on, because if you just completely erase Unioda from the equation, like this is a really competitive league.
Yes.
Like Huntington, Piketon, Adena, I think have kind of separated themselves as the like 2, 3, 4, but like Westfall and Zane Trace seem like they're pretty solid this year. Southeastern traditionally has been pretty good the last few years.
Symmes Valley just put it on Southeastern.
Did they beat Southeastern?
Yeah, beat them 58-42 on Saturday. So
I would have lost that pick 'em.
Well, and then Zane Trace wins over Westfall.
Yep. Which I think we probably both would have picked Westfall to win that game.
So it's just it's a league that, even though the top is better at this point, they're, I think the other teams are going to be competitive on most nights. I think that Payne Valley team, they hit 10 threes in that game against Southeastern. Anybody that hits 10 threes, you're going to be in the game. So I think it's ultimately a pretty balanced league, I think. But I do think Piketon has a little bit of a leg up on their way to separating themselves, even from that next group, which is the Huntington Adena. If they get this win, that would kind of separate them a little bit more as well. Now,
Piketon's jump from 2 years ago to last year to this year has been really impressive. They've really elevated their game. And I mean, you look at them last year with, a really impressive freshman group. And I think all of those players, you talked about Kelly, Forbes, and Shanks have really made that big jump to their, you hear the sophomore slumps and players don't perform as well in their second years. Maybe they did in their, maybe they exceeded expectations as freshmen, but that's obviously not been the case for this group.
And this is a wild thing. I think they like each other. I think that helps. Like, anytime you have good team chemistry, and I think that Piketon team does, just from watching them, is going to make you a little bit better. It's going to make you play a little bit harder for the person next to you when you genuinely want to win with them. So, that senior class that had a couple of rough years, mixing in with that sophomore class, and good things are on their way for Piketon. I think they're a team that maybe in 2 years, that's a team that, if we're still doing this in 2 years, that might be they might be a team to pick in the SVC, because of pretty skilled, but also they're showing the talent that they have as well.
And this one on Wednesday, so we did go a little bit out of order, which we usually try to avoid, but I'm sure for one day it'll be all right. It'll be all right for one episode. All right, you ready for the quick picks?
Yeah, we kind of fixed it on this.
All right, so once again, we've got about 20-ish seconds before the quick picks get rolling. The games we're going to be picking, one we just talked about: Huntington at Piketon, Logan Elm at Amanda Clear Creek, West at Waverly, Minford versus Fayetteville at the Eastern Brown Classic, and then North Adams versus Notre Dame also at the Eastern Brown Classic. So I got about 3 seconds, and then we'll jump into it. Game 1, Huntington at Piketon.
Yeah, I think this is one where it's just Piketon playing really well at this point. They've won 9 out of 10. They beat Adena twice in that time. I don't think Huntington is playing as well. I do think the matchup of maybe Baker and Kelly will be really interesting to watch. But Piketon dominated the glass the first time. I think they have a chance to do so again. I'm going to take Piketon at home.
The last time you picked against Huntington, they won. Just this time it's tough. It's at Piketon. I think if it was at Huntington, I might have a different opinion. But I mean, you look at that first matchup as you wrote down. Nice English there for the college student. Tori Smith is a junior, 6.1 points per game. She had 19 in that matchup. So she was clearly the X factor in a game that was only decided by 5 points. Can she do that again, or can another player step up in that kind of way? I'm not sure. As you said, Piketon's been playing better basketball recently than maybe Huntington has. It's at Piketon. I'm going to take the Red Streaks as well. Logan Elm at Amanda. It was a 5-point game the first time.
Yeah, I think Kiki Ingram can shoot it and score it with anyone in the Southeast District 4. Logan Elm seems like they're starting to get a little healthier. Kimmy Petty can really play for them as well. Taylor Evans and Amanda has just been I've used Enigma a couple different times today, and it's kind of the same thing. They didn't play very well last weekend as they were blown out by Fairfield Union and then squeaked one by with Waverly. I'm still going to take Amanda Clear Creek to win at home, though.
It's kind of the same thing as the first game. I think if it was at Logan Elm, although the trip isn't that long, I would probably take Logan Elm. And like I said, it was a 5-point game the first time around at Logan Elm. And I don't know. Like you said, they haven't played great the last two
The
games.
Heath win was kind of confusing as well.
I mean, a lopsided loss to Fairfield Union didn't exactly take care of Waverly like I thought they would. They've got Hamilton Township on Monday night. Man, this is a tough one. I think I'm going to go with Amanda just because I think overall, as you said, I think they've just been the better basketball team this year. Game 3, West at Waverly.
Yeah, trying to make up some time. I think West is just playing a little better basketball. Waverly, a little too inconsistent for me. So I'm going to take Macy Wistman, Bradley Pistol, and the Senators.
Yeah, I haven't seen either of these teams, but I did see West last year, and they're, other than Emma Sayre and I think Kate Rollins were the two big seniors that graduated. I think they're mostly the same, just a year older. I think they're 10-3 is what they're currently sitting at. And as you said, Waverly's this would be the kind of game that Waverly wins because they've won some games that maybe didn't think they would, but they've also, or maybe they've
competed.
It's competed a word?
Yes.
Okay. They've competed in games that I'm just killing it with the grammar today.
Yeah.
I'll just stop right there. I'm going with West as well, just to save a little time. All right. Minford and Fayetteville at Eastern Brown.
Man, this is Fayetteville 13-0 has played really, really well this year. Minford seems to be healthy and getting there at the right time. I think the mix of Williams, Conkle, Reisner, the Pendletons, Cronin, Davis, you've got a really nice mix for Minford. But this Fayetteville team, 13-0, like 13-0 is 13-0. So I'm going to take Fayetteville on the neutral court.
Yeah, I mean, really, this is the top, as it stands, the top Shack team versus the top SOC 3 team. Picked against Minford last week, didn't go too well in my favor. They've looked impressive. They probably have the most dominant big in our coverage area. Yeah. I mean, it seems. I mean, Lindsay Williams, I'm not sure there's a lot of people that can guard her. I'm going to roll with Minford just to get a little bit of a little different pick going in here. I think the Falcons have played really good basketball lately. Obviously, the win against Wheelersburg was big for them. And didn't they beat somebody else as well? I can't remember off the top of my head. I'll have to look after we're done here.
They just beat West.
Oh, who's that? Who they beat? They beat West as well. So we'll move on to Game 5. I think we've got 50 seconds. I'm not sure, but North Adams and Notre Dame.
North Adams
also at Eastern Brown.
Yeah, also at Eastern Brown. I think Berger and Strickland will be an interesting matchup in this one. I'm actually going to take Notre Dame just because of how well they played against the size of Green, where that was only a 2-point game. So ultimately, I am going to take Notre Dame in this one. I think it's going to be a tight one. I was impressed with what we saw at North Adams in that game against Hillsborough.
Yeah, I don't really have a good reason for it. I don't have a whole lot of time, but I've seen North Adams once. They look good against Hillsborough, who, I mean, is 2 points away from, leading the FAC right now. So once again, just so I can maybe make up some ground in the standings as I trail by 3, I'm going to go with North Adams. So that'll round out our quick picks. I think we had 5 total differences, so the same as last week. So somebody's got to walk away with an advantage for
at least a small
this
one.
week. So kind of similar to the boys, some pretty interesting games on the slate this week.
Yeah, I will say when I pulled up the Fayetteville schedule and saw their win against Lynchburg was much closer than the Minford game was. I don't know if I love my pick of Fayetteville over Minford, but sticking with it.
We've learned this year especially, that the transitive property is about as accurate as flipping a coin. So, I think that's kind of the way, especially with these non-conference games, that I kind of go about picking winners, just because you just don't really know with the non-conference stuff. You just try to compare who teams have played. Mm-hmm. And like I said, it's not the most accurate. If it was super accurate, I would be 50-0 with my pick'ems, but that's just simply not how it works. I think I'm 29, and what are the standings right now? I'm 29-21, and you're 32-18. So you have a 3-point lead right now. Picking basketball is a lot harder than I think picking football is.
Yeah.
Because
football, you have a pretty good idea. Although our lead writers have not been great on the picking the SVC winner the last couple of years. So
In basketball, there's more games. You play the
Well,
same teams 2 different times, and I just upsets. Football is where upsets happen the least, if we're being honest. I
Well,
think it
and
goes baseball, basketball, and then football.
if
I'm not sure where soccer ranks amongst that, but
the NCAA tournament was, kind of chalk wise, it wouldn't be March Madness, and it's because you see upsets. You don't think.
well, didn't the team that won some like NCAA college tournament, they weren't even ranked or something weird?
Oh, it happens. I mean, well, Virginia won the national championship the year after they were the first 1 seed to ever lose to a 16.
Right.
So, I mean, Purdue was a 16 or was a 1 and lost with a
Who
giant.
did they lose to?
I can't even remember.
I can't either. That's driving me nuts because I remember there was a big thing in the opposing teams. It was something with an F, I believe.
Fairleigh Dickinson.
Yep, that's what I thought.
Yeah. Oh, good news! Buckeye basketball gets to play at Purdue on Tuesday. Yay! That'll go well. Sure, it'll be a 1-point loss because that's what happens
in overtime.
Yeah. But yeah, I think the Winners Classic has a chance to be pretty interesting over there. I think that McLean and Goshen game, that I haven't really looked at what Goshen has done so far this year, so I guess I can pull that up right quick on the SBAAC website.
They have Goshen's 9-6.
Yeah. So Western Brown 10-5. So that'll be an interesting matchup to see kind of where McLean is, and it's not like Goshen's blowing teams out. They have a 9-point, or being 9-6, they only average winning by 7 points. They've lost 4 straight though, so that one has a chance to be interesting as well. So I think this will be a good week of basketball.
Anything extra you want to add before we get out of here? It's snowing again, so we got to be careful.
Yeah, let's go. I brought a scraper with me.
I didn't.
Well, you can use it on your car.
I could.
We're at the downtown
I don't
studio.
know. I'm not sure if it's been icy, though. I think it might just be kind of powder snow out there. We've only been here for a couple hours. Well, I guess it's been about 4, but
yeah, it's been a long time.
It's not really as long as it usually is. So
yeah.
Episode 60, pretty much in the books here from the downtown Chillicothe studio. Really good week of basketball on tap. 3 live streams for us this week, all going to be boys games. It's been on the ticker if you've paid attention to it, which I'm guessing in about a 2-hour show, it probably goes through. I think it only takes 2 or 3 minutes to go through. So it's gone through a handful of times. Tuesday night we'll be in Portsmouth as the Trojans host Ironton for a boys basketball game. Friday night, Waverly at West for the second time. I don't know what the final ended up being there, but I know that it was like a 2-point game in the fourth quarter in Tiger Town. So that also a boys game should be a good one on the west side. And then we'll wrap it up with a really big SOC 2 matchup in Beaver as Symmes Valley makes the trip to Eastern Piketon.
Yeah, adding some schools to our streaming
it'll
schedule.
Be 5 new teams, five teams this week of our 6 that we're doing that we haven't covered, and the only team that we've covered is Waverly. So adding on to that number, that'll be substantially larger than last year's. Thank you, Jim Barry.
Yeah, it'll have a lot more out of area coverage than what we normally do.
All right. If you don't have anything extra to add, another great episode on the podcast.
See, go Bucks, but this is going to come out after. So hopefully they won.
This is pre-national championship game. This is a high school podcast. We're not going to bore you with some football talk, but hopefully things go in favor of us. It seems like
you go there.
But you're right, and I don't really want to.
I went to the school that doesn't have football, so I think I can cheer for them. I graduated from 2 colleges that don't have football. I went to 3 different schools. None of them have football.
I don't really want to jinx myself or the school or the entire state, but it seems like the story is kind of playing in Ohio State's favor. But we'll see. We'll see what happens.
My fourth school I got into might as well not have football too. I'll tell you that off the air.
Okay. All right, that'll wrap it up for this week's episode of SOSA Overtime, presented by Perfection One.